Welcome to Wife Cheating Story. I hope you have an enjoyable and relaxing time listening. Let's get started.
Calvin Nightingale stood frozen at the doorway, watching his wife Andrea's laughter echo through the room, her hand lingering just a moment too long on Arnold's arm. Months of suspicion swirled into certainty. His wife, the woman he built his life around, was betraying him with their closest family friend. But the affair was just the surface. Beneath it lay a darker web of manipulation and greed, her lies, their stolen moments, the whispered plans to leave him after using him for one last grand scheme. "He's so naive," she had laughed once. Unaware, Calvin was already preparing her reckoning. Chapter 1. Calvin Nightingale paused at the threshold of his own living room, taking in the laughter and chatter swirling around him. Soft jazz played in the background of the elegant, high-ceilinged townhouse. Andrea, his wife of 9 years, was leaning over the marble-topped bar, cocktail in hand, charming half a dozen of their friends with her wit. Next to Andrea stood Arnold Weathers, a longtime family friend whose body language signaled an intimacy Calvin had begun to suspect. Tonight's gathering was meant to celebrate Andrea's new milestone, her appointment as an event consultant for a philanthropic gala. The invitation list included names from the city's high society, real estate moguls, a state senator, local celebrities, and old acquaintances of Andrea's influential parents, Vernon and Genevieve Claiborne. At 38, Calvin wore success with an understated confidence. He was a senior partner at Nightingale and Cross Capital, a boutique investment firm he had co-founded a decade prior. But no matter how refined he became, or how deeply he integrated into Andrea's old money circle, there remained a quiet sense that they never quite accepted him fully. He was the rags store cheese story from a rural southwestern town, a man who had climbed into an elite sphere by grit, cunning, and intelligence. Some found him impressive, others found him a curiosity. He moved toward the bar, a practiced social smile in place. Andrea's face lit up when she saw him approach like a rehearsed reflex rather than genuine affection. She had always been good at that, curating the perfect outward image, especially when eyes were on them. "Calvin, darling, there you are," Andrea's voice rang out. She placed her champagne flute aside, beckoning him closer. "We were just talking about your expansions at the firm, some big new project in Dubai, right?" Calvin nodded, shaking Arnold's hand in the process. "Yes. We're finalizing a real estate fund there. Potentially a high yield," he said calmly. But his mind was elsewhere. Over the last few months, he had noticed subtle changes in Andrea's manner. How she angled her body toward Arnold, the private jokes they shared, the text messages that stopped abruptly when he walked into the room. Andrea gently squeezed Calvin's arm, a picture of the affectionate wife. The guests near them smiled politely at the apparently idyllic couple. But Calvin sensed the hidden tension in Andrea's posture. She was performing for them just as she performed for him. Within minutes, Calvin excused himself on the pretext of refreshing the ice bucket. He left Andrea and Arnold engaged in a lively conversation about charitable event themes. He weaved through the crowd, pausing to greet others, ensuring that none suspected the swirling suspicion in his mind. In the kitchen, he set the ice bucket down, letting out a quiet breath. He had tested the waters over the last few weeks. A well-placed question about Arnold's travel schedule, a feigned oversight of Andrea's calendar. Enough small inconsistencies emerged to confirm his suspicion that the two were meeting clandestinely. Andrea's story about working late on Gala logistics always aligned suspiciously with Arnold's late-night business dinners. Calvin had also found an earring in the passenger seat of Arnold's sports car while at a golf outing, recognized it as one of Andrea's favorite pieces. She had insisted it was lost weeks prior. The discovery had sealed his determination to investigate further. He returned with the ice bucket in time to see Vernon Claiborne making a toast, the older man's deep voice carrying effortlessly over the quiet hum of the jazz. Vernon was a retired judge with a polished charm that belied a manipulative streak. Next to him, Genevieve stood in an elegant gown, exuding the quiet authority of old money matriarchs. The Claiborne family had wealth, connections, and a knack for controlling narratives. They had accepted Calvin only after it became clear that his business acumen elevated Andrea's status. "Ladies and gentlemen," Vernon intoned, "here's to Andrea's success in directing the charity ball for the Aurora Relief Foundation. May her creativity and dedication continue to honor the Claiborne legacy." Applause followed. Calvin joined in, but quietly. He met Andrea's eyes across the room. She smiled, a bright, brittle expression. The tension between them had grown over months, yet they maintained appearances. An hour later, guests began trickling out, leaving behind a swirl of expensive perfume and half-finished drinks. Arnold lingered, apparently waiting for a private word with Andrea. Calvin made a show of discussing some investment detail with a friend near the foyer, all while discreetly observing how Arnold hovered near the bar. When the final well-wishers left, Arnold approached Andrea. "I'll call you tomorrow," he whispered. She nodded, placing her hand on his forearm briefly. In that fleeting moment, Calvin spotted the unspoken intimacy in their eyes, one more piece of confirmation. Calvin saw them exchange a look that was too practiced, too comfortable. Then Arnold was gone. Calvin, controlling his expression, approached Andrea, offering a glass of water. She accepted it with a small sigh, leaning her head on his shoulder. "That was quite an evening." He brushed a hand over her hair. "You did well. Always the perfect hostess. Congratulations, dear wife." She gazed up, suspicious that his tone lacked genuine warmth, but he simply touched her cheek lightly. "I'm heading to bed soon." "Of course," she replied, her posture stiffening. He ascended the spiral staircase, ignoring the pang in his chest. Betrayal stung, but he had endured more brutal betrayals in his youth. In business, deals gone sour. In the dog-eat-dog environment of corporate finance, he wouldn't lash out blindly. Instead, he'd gather facts, plan meticulously, and deliver a reckoning so thorough that Andrea and anyone who colluded with her would never forget. Chapter 2. Calvin awakened the next day to find Andrea already gone, presumably at a meeting with her Gala subcommittee. The mansion felt cavernous and empty. He dressed for the office with calm deliberation, mind swirling with potential strategies. As the silent house enveloped him, he resolved to start collecting solid proof before confronting Andrea. He arrived at Nightingale and Cross Capital in the city's financial district. The bright modern foyer showcased success built on shrewd deals and precise risk management tools that served him well. He passed staff offices and greeted employees with affable nods. Everyone admired his business instincts, though few truly knew him. Closing his office door, he activated a separate phone line. "Vivian, I need your help," he said, when the call connected. Vivian Green was an old friend from Calvin's earliest days at a major investment bank, someone who specialized in forensic accounting and discreet investigations. She had left the corporate world to run a private practice focusing on sensitive matters. Vivian's voice lilted with a mixture of curiosity and concern. "Interesting. Last time you asked for a personal favor, you suspected money laundering in a client's account. What's this about?" Calvin exhaled. "I suspect my wife is having an affair with Arnold Weathers. I need conclusive proof. But more importantly, I suspect there might be deeper collusion with her parents. I need a broader scope." Possibly financial anomalies or any off-limits alliances. Vivian paused. You want a standard matrimonial infiltration plus due diligence on her family's finances? Exactly. They might have resources to bury evidence. I can't risk confronting them unprepared. He recalled the Claiborne family's quiet but potent influence. If you find anything on Arnold or the in-laws, any illicit business, hidden accounts, or conflicts of interest, tell me first. Do it discreetly, no official channels. Vivian agreed, naming her fee. Calvin accepted without hesitation. He had built a war chest precisely for unexpected battles. After finalizing details, he ended the call, leaning back in his leather chair. He tapped into his private files, reviewing a side business project that he had been cultivating quietly. An AI-driven software for advanced pattern detection in financial statements. He had developed it initially to detect corporate fraud. Now, ironically, it might detect personal treachery if the Claiborne family was funneling money for secret purposes. Knocking interrupted his thoughts. Vernon Claiborne stepped in, unannounced. The older man gave a paternal smile, which didn't fool Calvin. Quite the soiree last night, Vernon began. Your wife truly dazzles. I hope you're proud. Calvin rose, gesturing for Vernon to sit. Always proud. Your family's guidance shaped her success. The usual pleasantries, but Calvin remained watchful. Vernon rarely visited him at the firm. Vernon got to the point. Andrea has big plans for the Aurora Relief Foundation's upcoming gala. She'll need financial backing, sizable backing. The Claiborne name plus your business brilliance can make it the year's highlight. Calvin forced a casual nod. I'll consider some sponsorship, but Aurora Relief's finances need to be verified. We can't just pour money into a black box. Vernon's eyes glinted, the mild disapproval poorly concealed. Calvin, the Claibornes handle philanthropic efforts with the utmost integrity. This is about trust. I had hoped you'd be more supportive. The subtext was clear. Vernon expected unconditional support for any family endeavor. In the past, Calvin had complied out of respect for Andrea. Now he simply said, I'll do my due diligence. That's my job. Vernon's jaw tightened slightly. Well, I trust you'll see the bigger picture soon. Andrea's reputation is at stake, as is the family's. He rose, forcing a cordial smile. Looking forward to hearing about your involvement. As he left, Calvin couldn't miss the hint of threat in Vernon's tone. The Claiborne family expected loyalty from their son-in-law, loyalty that overshadowed facts or financial caution. If they discovered he was investigating them, the fallout would be explosive. Calvin returned to his screen, pulling up Aurora Relief Foundation's public financials. He noticed it was the parent organization behind Andrea's gala. On paper, everything looked standard: philanthropic grants, donations from major donors, respectable overhead. But a gut feeling told him something was off. He would let Vivian cross-check these records for hidden anomalies. That evening, Calvin quietly installed a small device in Andrea's personal car. He had done enough reading on advanced trackers to choose one that was nearly undetectable. If Andrea was meeting Arnold in discreet places, he needed real-time data. He also replaced the living room security system with a more sophisticated model that saved backups to off-site servers. Officially, it was an upgrade for better home security. In truth, it captured audio from key areas, including Andrea's office nook. He'd never done this in their 9-year marriage, always trusting her. Now, he recognized the necessity. Over the next days, Andrea moved about her usual schedule: charity lunches, site visits for the gala, dinners with friends. The GPS tracker indicated she indeed visited some known public spots. But once, It led to a private townhouse across the River Arnold's townhouse. Calvin calmly watched the location data. No calls from Andrea explaining why she was there. She returned 3 hours later, claiming she had a meeting with the gala's floral sponsor. Calvin forced neutrality whenever they spoke. Her manipulative skill at lying so casually both angered and fascinated him. He waited, knowing the bigger confrontation was yet to come. Late one night, Calvin reviewed the security footage from their living room. He froze at the audio feed. Andrea on the phone with someone Arnold. She mentioned how they had to maintain the guise a bit longer, but soon they might find a more permanent solution. She laughed about how naive he was. The pronoun was obviously Calvin. She had also said, "I can't stand the charade, but my father insists we keep him on board until after the gala. We need his backing for the foundation, or we lose credibility." Another piece of the puzzle. The Claibornes needed Calvin for financial security. They had no plan to continue the marriage once they secured his sponsorship. He saved the audio snippet in a secure drive, labeling it Proof of Collusion 2. The fury he felt was tempered by a sense of gratification that his patience was paying off. He was collecting everything he needed to orchestrate a total downfall. One afternoon, Calvin received a discreet message from his longtime friend, Genevieve Price, a senior analyst at his firm, ironically sharing the same first name as Andrea's mother. She asked for a private meeting. Genevieve Price had joined the firm 2 years ago, quickly proving her worth through strong analytical skills. They had developed a professional rapport. She had never requested a private meeting outside of normal channels. In the privacy of a side conference room, Genevieve revealed she had come across unusual wire transfers in a special fund that Calvin's wife occasionally used for philanthropic projects. The fund had been created to finance Andrea's pet charity events. "I saw repeated small transactions like microlaundering. Each is under a threshold that triggers standard AML checks, but collectively it's huge." She frowned. "Some of them route through accounts linked to the Claiborne family's holdings, then vanish." Calvin feigned mild surprise. "Interesting. Could it just be routine event expenses?" Genevieve shook her head. "It's atypical. I ran a cross-check on the recipients. Many are shell companies with no real activity, and the final deposit often ends up in a single entity. Amaranth Solutions, LLC. That shell is untraceable in typical public records." He recognized an opportunity. "Could you gather more data discreetly? Possibly talk with our compliance officer, but do not escalate yet. We want to be sure." She hesitated. "Mr. Nightingale, if these are illicit flows, we risk serious liability. Should we freeze them?" He softened his tone. "Not yet. Let's not tip them off. Document everything carefully. Keep me updated directly." She nodded, relieved to have direction. Once alone, Calvin realized this might be the key to unraveling the Claibornes' entire scheme. They were likely channeling illicit funds through the philanthropic facade, possibly laundering money for personal gains or political bribes. If so, it was a perfect lever to bring them down. The next day, Vernon Claiborne appeared at Calvin's office again, this time unannounced and clearly agitated. He placed an official-looking proposal on Calvin's desk, referencing a massive donation from the firm to the Aurora Relief Foundation. "My dear boy," Vernon said with forced joviality, "the Aurora Relief Foundation must finalize sponsor commitments. We'd like a $2 million pledge from Nightingale and Cross. It's for a good cause, and it ensures Andrea's Gala remains the city's highlight." Calvin kept his expression neutral. $2 million is a big ask, even for charitable events. We'd normally sponsor at a smaller level unless we see a full breakdown of fund allocation. Vernon's veneer cracked. "Breakdown. You think we're incompetent. The Claiborne name stands for something. Your caution insults me. Or is it that you no longer trust your own wife's project? Calvin stared him down. Judge Claiborne, you must understand that I'm answerable to the firm's partners. Any large sponsorship must pass standard diligence. Alternatively, if you or the foundation can't handle transparency, there's not much I can do. Vernon's face darkened, but he forced a laugh. Fine. We'll provide some documents, but do recall, Andrea's public success is tied to your generosity. If she fails, it reflects on you. After Vernon left, Calvin smiled grimly at the implied threat. Do as we say, or your wife's reputation, and thus your marriage's facade, suffers. They didn't realize he had no intention of saving the marriage or their illusions. He would let them think so, right until the hammer fell. Days later, Calvin spotted Arnold at an upscale lounge, ironically the same place where Calvin had scheduled a casual firm networking event. Arnold, clearly not expecting Calvin, froze momentarily. Then he smoothed his expression and offered a friendly greeting. "How's your latest expansion in Asia?" Arnold asked, projecting confidence. "Progressing," Calvin replied. "Your business must be thriving too, right? Heard about your new real estate acquisitions?" Arnold's eyes flickered. He tried to appear relaxed. "Yes, some promising deals. We might talk synergy." Calvin recognized the attempt to maintain normalcy. "I'm sure. By the way, Andrea's quite busy preparing for the gala. I suppose you're helping her out?" Arnold hesitated. "I do what I can, but she handles most of it. That's her domain." Their conversation remained superficially polite. Calvin gleaned that Arnold was anxious about being cornered. If Arnold suspected that Calvin knew about the affair, it might push him to make a reckless move. Calvin let the tension linger, neither confirming nor denying anything. As Arnold turned to leave, Calvin quietly said, "By the way, I found that earring you said Andrea lost. I discovered it in your car." Arnold stiffened. "I'm sure there's an explanation." "Oh, I'm sure," Calvin responded with an inscrutable smile. "Send me that explanation sometime, will you?" Then he walked away, hearing Arnold's sharp exhalation behind him. Back in his car, Calvin processed the confrontation. It was a strategic move to hint that he knew. He wanted them a bit nervous, more likely to slip up, reveal bigger secrets. The final blow needed them rattled. Returning home that night, Calvin found Andrea pacing in the living room. She looked up, eyes clouded with worry. "Cal, did you speak to Dad? He said you were being difficult about the foundation pledge." He set down his briefcase. "I just requested standard documents. Doesn't sound difficult to me." She frowned. "They want to finalize in 2 weeks. The gala's approaching. Why can't you be supportive? We're family." He forced a gentle tone. "Andrea, I'd be supportive if I had clarity on where the money goes. Your father balked at providing details. I'm sure it's a simple misunderstanding." Andrea bit her lip. "I hate being in the middle of you two. Couldn't you just trust him? This is the Claiborne family after all." He studied her face, wanting to press about her secret visits to Arnold. Instead, he softly changed the subject. "Let's not argue. I know the gala matters to you. I promise I'll do what I can once I see everything is legitimate." She let out a breath, half relieved. "All right, thank you. It's just we can't let petty misunderstandings overshadow the bigger event." He smiled, stepping forward to place a hand on her shoulder. "Of course. I only want the best for you." She relaxed slightly, leaning into him. For a moment, the old warmth flared, reminding him of how things used to be before she changed. Or had she always been that way and he'd just never noticed? As she retreated to her bedroom, he whispered to himself, "You have no idea what's coming, Andrea." He felt a pang of regret for the woman he once believed in, but that was overshadowed by the firm resolve that the lies had to end. He glanced at the updated notes on his phone. Vivian's preliminary findings indicated the Aurora Relief Foundation's consulting fees soared beyond normal. The next step was verifying whether the Claibornes were funneling these funds into personal pockets or bribing officials. Soon, he would have enough to topple their entire empire. Chapter 3. Calvin moved strategically, assembling an arsenal of evidence while maintaining his outward facade as the devoted husband and respectful son-in-law. Over the next few weeks he juggled Vivian's private investigation into Andrea's affair and the Claiborne finances, Genevieve Price's ongoing forensic analysis at the firm. His personal monitoring software scanning foundation records, surveillance on Arnold's townhouse, and phone logs. He mapped out a timeline for the final strike, the date. The Aurora Relief Foundation Gala. By then, he aimed to have enough evidence to not only expose the affair, but also reveal the entire Claiborne money laundering scheme. But the biggest question: how deeply was Andrea involved in the family's potential crimes? One evening, Andrea returned from a foundation meeting, exhausted. She found Calvin in his study, reviewing notes. She moved behind him, massaging his shoulders gently. "Working so hard?" she teased softly, her breath near his ear. He forced a smile, trying to act normal. "Yes. Big expansions for the Middle East Fund. Must stay ahead of the curve." She leaned in. "I appreciate your ambition, but don't wear yourself out. The gala's soon. I'll need you at your best." The warmth of her closeness tugged at conflicting emotions. Part of him still remembered the woman he married, the illusions of love that had sustained him. Yet every day, the truth about her betrayal sharpened his resolve. He closed his laptop, turning to face her. "I'll be there, I promise. By the way, how's Arnold's role in the gala?" He tested her reaction. Her eyes flickered just a fraction. "He's providing some corporate sponsorship from his firm, that's all. He's busy with real estate expansions, so not too involved." Calvin nodded as though satisfied. "Good. Just checking." She retreated to their bedroom, leaving him staring at the closed door. He wondered if she ever felt guilt for lying so smoothly. Probably not. Her father's example had taught her to mask everything. The next morning, Calvin stepped into the bustling city air, heading to a discreet cafe where Vivian had arranged a meeting. She had texted an urgent update. "You must see these files in person." He found her in a corner booth wearing a subtle disguise of tinted glasses. She slid a folder across the table. "I've confirmed money laundering, but it's more elaborate than we suspected. They're funneling funds into offshore accounts labeled philanthropic expansions. The Aurora Relief Foundation is a front for bribes to city officials, real estate acquisitions, and hush money for certain media outlets." Calvin skimmed the top pages, seeing transaction logs that connected the foundation to multiple Claiborne shell companies. Some transfers specifically linked to Amaranth Solutions, LLC. Vivian continued, "These shell accounts also pay for personal luxuries, Andrea's luxury shopping sprees, Genevieve Claiborne's charity tours in Europe, and possibly Vernon's secret property in the Caribbean. It's massive." She frowned. "Your wife's name appears often. Some forms show her signature. She might be signing them under the impression it's for genuine charitable expansions, or maybe she knows more." He set the folder down, face grim. "So they might have roped Andrea into financial fraud, making her complicit or unwittingly complicit." Vivian's voice held measured concern. "She's either a naive puppet or an active collaborator. The net result is the same legally?" He exhaled slowly. "We need to confirm her awareness. This evidence is enough to implicate them all in felony charges. But I want a solid timeline. If she's knowingly forging documents, it means she's not just cheating on me personally, but also crossing legal lines. They hashed out a plan, gather final confirmations, then time the public exposure to coincide with the gala. That event would be the Claiborne's crowning moment, and when the scandal hit, it would ensure maximum impact. Vivian added a cautious note. Be aware. They'll sense something soon. If they catch wind that you're investigating, they might lash out or accelerate their own schemes. Are you prepared for potential retaliation? Calvin's jaw tightened. I have contingencies. He didn't elaborate that he had quietly shifted certain assets and formed backup alliances with key city players who disliked the Claibornes. If push came to shove, he'd unleash every resource. Returning home that evening, Calvin found Andrea quietly distraught in the living room. She looked up, worry etched on her face. Dad's furious he said you're stalling on the foundation pledge. He claims your firm is making the foundation look suspicious, scaring donors. Calvin feigned mild confusion. The firm? Possibly they're just doing standard compliance checks. Don't blame me for due diligence. Andrea's voice trembled. Cal, Dad says if you don't come through, the gala could be a disaster. I'm so close to a major success that cements me as a top event consultant. Please, can't you expedite it? We have just 2 weeks left. He gently took her hand, looking into her eyes. Andrea, I'm not your enemy. I want your success. Let me talk to my compliance people tomorrow. We'll see what can be done. She relaxed a fraction, gratitude mixing with guilt. Thank you. I know we've been distant. I appreciate you supporting me. She leaned in, pressing her forehead to his chest. For a moment, he felt the old stir of affection overshadowed by the knowledge that she was deceiving him. He carefully masked his thoughts. A few days later, Calvin stepped into the guest suite that Andrea sometimes used as an office, searching for a particular document. He found her laptop open, the screen showing an email chain with Arnold. The subject line read, Gala Plans Private Rendezvous. The words leapt out at him. He tapped the mouse, scanning quickly. The chain was explicit, references to meeting at Arnold's townhouse, the excuse story for Calvin, references to the final step after the gala. They planned to reveal their relationship once the gala ended. They even joked about how Calvin was too busy with his deals to suspect. He forwarded the entire chain to a secure account, deleting any trace of his action. Then, breathing quietly, he closed the laptop. So it was confirmed beyond doubt. Andrea was actively planning to leave him for Arnold after ensuring they got his backing for the Foundation's big event. The personal betrayal was complete. He left the suite with a quiet satisfaction. The net was closing in on them. No more illusions that Andrea might be an unwitting pawn. She was fully complicit in deceiving him for her father's cause and for her own personal affair. He would let them proceed, let them think the game was still theirs, right up until the moment he unveiled everything. That night, Andrea mentioned an upcoming overnight meeting with Foundation staff at a countryside inn to finalize last-minute details. She even tried to sweeten it, saying, I'd love to invite you, but it's an all-ladies event. He nodded, playing along, well aware she and Arnold intended a romantic getaway. Her brazen lies further fueled his quiet resolve. Chapter 4. The days ticked closer to the gala. The Claibornes ramped up pressure, calling Calvin daily about finalizing the pledge. In parallel, Vivian and Genevieve Price each provided new revelations. A suspicious set of corporate accounts in Andrea's name, more direct evidence of falsified documents. Meanwhile, Arnold's real estate expansions were financed partly by these questionable foundation grants, which seemed to exist purely to enrich him. Calvin assembled a meticulous, black dossier containing every piece of incriminating material, from Andrea's affair to the Claiborne's money laundering to potential political bribes to Arnold's personal involvement. He stored it on multiple secure servers, with instructions for it to automatically forward to law enforcement, media, and high-level contacts if something happened to him. He had learned the importance of such dead man's switch strategies in the competitive world of finance. One evening, he discovered a cryptic text on his phone from an unknown number. "Be careful. They suspect you. Move your timeline." No further details. Possibly an ally within the Claiborne circle. He took it seriously. Someone might have tipped them off that Calvin was too cautious. Or maybe it was a trap to push him into acting prematurely. He decided to accelerate certain tasks, just in case. 1 week before the gala, Andrea approached Calvin with forced cheer at breakfast. "Darling, the foundation staff gave me great news. We might have a top official from the city attending the gala. Isn't that wonderful for exposure?" He sipped his coffee, reading the tension behind her bright tone. "Yes, wonderful indeed. This official must be quite influential. Did your father arrange it?" She nodded. "Yes, Dad pulled some strings. This official could open doors for the foundation's expansions. Also, they want you to be part of the official reception line. Perhaps you'll even give a short speech. You know, to confirm the pledge publicly." She tried a casual shrug, but her eyes gleamed with anxiety. They needed him to make a public commitment. He leaned back. "I'll think about it. I like having the option to see final numbers first." She forced a playful pout. "You and your data. You trust me, right?" Her attempt at seduction was overshadowed by a nervous flicker in her eyes. He gave a small laugh. "Always. Just let me do my job. We have a synergy, remember?" He used one of their old catchphrases ironically, and she brightened as though relieved. That night, after Andrea slept, Calvin finalized the infiltration plan with Vivian. On the gala day, they would stage a partial meltdown of the Foundation's internal systems, prompting a compliance check from certain authorities that Vivian had discreetly primed. The doping would coincide with Calvin publicly withdrawing or adjusting the pledge based on discovered anomalies. This would force the Claibornes into public scrutiny. Then the revelations about Arnold and Andrea's affair would come to light all at once, ensuring maximum scandal. He also prepared an ally in the city's press, an investigative journalist named Vivian, not to confuse with Vivian Green or rename. The user specifically says we can reuse, or if we want to avoid confusion, let's rename the journalist to Maribel Cross. Let's rename the journalist to Maribel Cross. She had once been a client's daughter who Calvin had helped during a defamation lawsuit. She owed him a favor. She'd be present at the gala as a friendly reporter, ready to break the story the moment Calvin gave the signal. 3 nights before the gala, Genevieve and Vernon Claiborne invited Calvin and Andrea to a private family dinner. The atmosphere was tense from the start. Genevieve Claiborne wore an elegant expression of detachment, while Vernon tried to appear jovial. Andrea seemed on edge, and Arnold's presence at a family dinner was suspiciously normal for them. They dined in an ornate dining room, chandeliers casting warm light on the polished table. Eventually, Vernon cleared his throat. "Calvin, we truly hope the pledge is finalized by the gala's opening. It's crucial for the Foundation's future." Calvin gave a measured smile. "I appreciate the significance. But as you know, I handle finances carefully. We'll see." Genevieve's voice carried a subtle threat. "We'd hate to see a last-minute meltdown overshadow Andrea's big moment. The Claiborne name stands for stability." Andrea shot Calvin a pleading look. He responded by turning to Arnold, abruptly changing the subject. "Arnold, How goes your real estate expansions? I'm sure the Foundation's infusion helps expedite them. Arnold flinched, glancing at Vernon, who frowned. Yes. We have some philanthropic synergy. The Foundation invests in certain community housing, Calvin pressed. Community housing or high-end condos that yield personal profit for you. His tone sounded mildly curious, but the tension spiked around the table. Vernon set his fork down with a sharp tap. How dare you insinuate wrongdoing? Genevieve's eyes flashed. We invited you here to unify the family. Andrea touched Calvin's arm, voice trembling. Cal, what's gotten into you? He faced them calmly. Just clarifying. My firm's compliance flagged something about your real estate expansions. We want to ensure everything is above board. Vernon's face reddened. Stop this nonsense. In 3 days, you'll stand before city officials and publicly back the Foundation. That's final. Don't forget who lifted you into these circles. Calvin's eyes locked on the older man. You're quite sure of your authority. Let's see how that works out for you. Silence, thick with unspoken threats, hung over the table. Genevieve forced a brittle smile. No need for unpleasantness. We're all family. Let's discuss something more pleasant. Calvin let the conversation shift, but the message was delivered he wouldn't be their pawn. Andrea's expression revealed her growing dread that everything might unravel. She had built her entire identity around pleasing her father, maintaining her social status, and now she feared losing it all if Calvin didn't comply. Late that night, Andrea cornered Calvin in the upstairs hallway. She wore an expression halfway between anger and desperation. What are you doing, Calvin? Why are you antagonizing my parents and Arnold? You're risking my entire career, my reputation, everything. He folded his arms calmly. I asked some basic questions, that's all. If your father can't handle it, maybe there's something to hide. Or are you worried I'll find out more? She looked away, trembling. You don't understand. They rely on the Foundation's success, and if you sabotage it, the fallout will affect you, obviously, because you're entangled in it. His voice was soft yet relentless. Andrea, is there something you want to tell me? Her eyes glistened momentarily, as though tears might form, but she reined it in. No, I just want you to trust me. Trust us. Please don't ruin the gala. You'll see it's all legitimate. She placed a hand on his chest. He gently removed her hand. I'll do what's right, Andrea. Then he walked away, leaving her standing in the silent hallway. The day before the gala, Calvin coordinated with Vivian Green, Genevieve Price, and his contact, Maribel Cross, the reporter. Each had roles. Vivian Green finalized the infiltration of Aurora Relief Foundation's digital records. Genevieve Price, stand by with firm compliance data about the suspicious Aurora accounts. Maribel Cross, attend the gala as a friendly journalist, ready to publicize the scandal once Calvin signaled. He also had told them, if anything happens to me, release everything widely, no second guesses. He had set up the distribution on multiple timed servers. The Claibornes might try anything, from intimidation to sabotage. That evening, Andrea packed her gown for the gala at a separate suite downtown. She told Calvin she'd stay there overnight to handle final event setup. He pretended to accept it calmly. Through the GPS tracker, he saw her car eventually parked at Arnold's townhouse, verifying the final pre-celebration. He clenched his jaw. Let them have their illusions. He updated the dossier with the final piece, recorded phone calls from Andrea's phone in which she and Arnold discussed a post-gala announcement of their union. The heartbreak, overshadowed by cold determination, stiffened Calvin's spine. Enough illusions tomorrow would be the day they all answered for their deceit. Chapter 5. The day of the Aurora Relief Foundation. Gala dawned with a heavy sky. Threatening rain and omen Calvin found darkly appropriate. He stood at the window of his city apartment. He'd chosen not to spend the final night in the townhouse, leaving Andrea to her own devices at the foundation suite. The past weeks had been a whirlwind of final preparations, cross-checks, and discreet updates from his allies. Vivian Green had completed the final infiltration of the Foundation's financial system. Genevieve Price had collated every suspicious transaction from the accounts Andrea controlled at Nightingale and Cross Capital. Maribel Cross, the investigative reporter, stood by with a near-finished exposé that only awaited Calvin's go signal to publish. That same morning, Calvin received an encrypted text from an unidentified number, perhaps the same ally who had once warned him. This time it read, "They are suspecting you fully. Arnold's contact at the PD has arranged a quiet watch. Tread carefully." It confirmed that the Claibornes, or at least Arnold, had tried to put him under some form of surveillance or intimidation. The timing was perfect for the final confrontation because it meant they were edgy, likely to make mistakes. He exhaled, checking the formal tuxedo he'd laid out. Tonight, he would walk into the gala not as Andrea's supportive husband, but as the orchestrator of their downfall. Outside, the swirl of clouds promised a storm. He relished the metaphor. That evening, the Aurora Relief Foundation Gala took place in an iconic downtown art museum, its modern architecture a sharp contrast to the old money circles that thrived in it. A long red carpet stretched from the main entry to the curb, lined by media snapping photos of arriving guests. Luxury cars, limousines, and city officials' vehicles arrived one by one, depositing Boston's high society. Calvin's car arrived modestly in the queue. He stepped out alone, ignoring the cameras that recognized him as the husband of the gala's creative director. The drizzle had turned into a light rain, so staff hurried with umbrellas. He politely waved them off, preferring to walk in the slight downpour. Let the raindrops soak his hair. It fit his mood. Inside, the grand atrium soared 3 stories tall, decked in shimmering silver and white decor that Andrea had meticulously planned. Expensive floral arrangements, custom lighting, and contemporary sculptures on loan from major collectors. It was a triumph of design. The hush of classical music contrasted with the murmur of wealthy guests mingling, a veneer of elegance over the roiling tensions Calvin sensed. He took a moment to survey the scene. Waiters in crisp uniforms circulated with champagne flutes. A live quartet played softly near the stage, and overhead spotlights illuminated a majestic art installation shaped like a stylized globe, symbolic of the Foundation's international mission. A giant banner read, "Aurora Relief Illuminating Hope Worldwide." The irony stung, given the Foundation's actual hidden crimes. Across the atrium, he spotted Andrea radiant in a silver gown, her hair styled in an elegant chignon. She wore a practiced smile, greeting donors and city officials, exuding confidence. By her side, Arnold lingered, controlling his body language to appear as a mere colleague, but Calvin recognized the undercurrent of intimacy. Vernon and Genevieve Claiborne were also present, holding court among influential politicians. Their eyes occasionally flicked toward Calvin, wariness evident in their gaze. They expected him to publicly announce a major pledge soon, ensuring the gala's success. Calvin squared his shoulders. The stage was set, the pawns were in place. He'd let them have their illusions for a few more hours. No sooner had Calvin stepped deeper into the crowd than Andrea approached him, linking arms. Her smile was bright, but her voice trembled faintly when she said, I'm so glad you're here. Everything's going beautifully, yes? He offered a gentle nod. You outdid yourself. It's stunning indeed. Congratulations. In that moment, he read relief in her eyes. She assumed he might be going along with her father's demands, no longer resisting the sponsor pledge. She whispered, Daddy said you had some concerns, but hopefully you've come around. We're scheduled to do the pledge announcement in an hour once the mayor arrives. You'll stand with me, right? His mouth quirked in a faint, inscrutable smile. Yes, dear. I'll be there. She exhaled, pressing a quick, affectionate peck to his cheek. Thank you. Then she was off again, ushered by a staff member to greet newly arriving VIPs. Calvin watched her go, tension thrumming through him. He felt fleeting pity. She truly believed he'd remain her unwitting dupe. But pity wouldn't deter him from the plan. They had chosen their path. He spotted a petite woman discreetly watching him from the edge of the crowd. That was Maribel Cross, the journalist. He moved casually in her direction, pausing to greet an acquaintance or two so as not to draw attention. Reaching her side, he smiled politely, as if making small talk with a random guest. All set? He murmured. Maribel nodded, passing him a small card that looked like a standard business card but was actually a digital storage device. Yes, my story is ready to go live the moment you text me the code word. I have prime vantage on the stage. Once you signal, I'll start the broadcast. He slipped the card into his pocket. Thank you. Keep your phone handy. She melted back into the throng, effectively invisible. Next, he spied Genevieve Price from his firm, standing near a sculpture, sipping champagne. She wore a formal gown that did little to mask her professional aura. Approaching her, he quietly asked, How's the infiltration? She murmured, Everything's ready. The moment we confirm your public statement, we'll release the flagged data to law enforcement. I have a contact at the state's financial crimes unit waiting. He nodded, lightly clinking her glass. Perfect. Wait for my cue. Then he slipped away, fully aware of how the Claibornes might have watchers lurking. Moments later, Vernon Claiborne cornered him near an ornate ice sculpture, forcibly cheerful, but with steel in his eyes. Calvin, the mayor just arrived. In half an hour, we do the big sponsor highlight. I trust you'll proclaim your full support. Calvin gave a mild shrug. I'll say what's right for the occasion. We do want to avoid any last-minute confusion, yes? Vernon's jaw tightened. No confusion, boy. You stand up there, pledge the amount we discussed, $2 million, make it seem sincere, or you sabotage your wife's event. Are you truly willing to humiliate Andrea in front of the entire city? Humiliation might come from other quarters, not me. Calvin said softly. But we'll see. A flicker of alarm crossed Vernon's face. He stepped closer, voice dropping. Don't toy with me. I've known men like you clawing your way up from nothing. You're ungrateful. The Claiborne name gave you social acceptance. Andrea lied to me for months, maybe years. Calvin cut in, letting a hint of bitterness show. But let's keep it civil, shall we? He moved away before Vernon could retort. While circulating among donors, Calvin noticed a man in a corner wearing a dark suit, eyes following him closely. He recognized him from old pictures. Randall Pierce, a detective rumored to have ties to the Claibornes. Possibly Vernon had arranged for quiet police presence to ensure no disruption. Indeed, the text warning about someone at the PD might refer to this detective. He decided to test the waters. Approaching the man, Calvin extended a handshake. Mr. Pierce, I believe, heard about your commendable work in the city's financial crimes division. Pierce's reaction was guarded. Just here as a guest, Nightingale. Surprised you recognize me. Calvin feigned a grin. I keep track of notable law enforcement figures, especially those who might investigate businesses. So, enjoying the gala? Pierce's stiff posture suggested he was uncomfortable with the direct approach. It's fine. I'm not investigating anything tonight, if that's your concern. Just admiring the Foundation's philanthropic efforts. Calvin gave a polite chuckle. Of course. Let me know if you see anything suspicious. Then he walked off, certain the detective was there to pounce if Calvin tried something. Perfect. He texted Vivian quietly. We have a PD detective present. Probability of immediate retaliation if we act is high. All set on your end? Her reply, yes, 100% ready. 15 minutes before the official sponsor highlight. Andrea found Calvin near the staircase leading to the mezzanine. She looked anxious, wringing her hands. Calvin, you'll stand with me, right? Dad's about to give his introduction, then we bring you up. The mayor's expecting a big announcement from you like the philanthropic press says it's the largest single pledge of the night. He offered a calm expression. Don't worry, I'll be there. You do your part, I'll do mine. Then maybe we'll talk after. She blinked. Yes, definitely, thank you. She reached out to squeeze his hand. This close, he smelled her perfume, evoking memories of better times. But the ephemeral sadness was overshadowed by clarity. She had chosen Arnold, had lied for so long. He wouldn't let nostalgia derail his mission. At precisely 8 o'clock, Vernon took the stage, the spotlight centering on him. Applause rose from the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Aurora Relief Foundation's annual gala. We gather tonight to support vital programs that bring hope to disadvantaged communities worldwide. My daughter, Andrea, has poured her heart into this event. Let's give her a hand. Andrea glided up, receiving warm applause. She sparkled under the lights, confidently touting the Foundation's mission, highlighting success stories, culminating with, and now, a word from my dear husband, Calvin Nightingale, who stands with us in unwavering support. All eyes turned to Calvin. The hush in the hall was palpable. He ascended the steps, noticing the Detective Pierce shifting position near the perimeter, Arnold standing off to the side, arms crossed, expression taut. Andrea handed Calvin the microphone, her eyes silently begging compliance. He gazed out at the sea of influential faces, politicians, business moguls, socialites, and behind them, hidden in the crowd, his allies, Vivian Green, Genevieve Price, Maribel Cross. The countdown in his mind had begun. He began quietly, voice measured. Good evening, everyone. It's an honor to address you at the Aurora Relief Foundation Gala. My wife, Andrea, has indeed dedicated countless hours to ensuring tonight's success. The Claiborne family, with their legacy, stands at the helm. Typically at this juncture, I'd publicly confirm a substantial pledge. You might expect me to say, we commit $2 million to Aurora Relief. But tonight I must deviate from that script. A ripple of tension stirred among the crowd. Andrea's eyes widened, her hand creeping toward his arm as if to stop him. He gently sidestepped her. He locked eyes with the mayor, with other city officials, letting each word resonate. In recent weeks, I've encountered serious irregularities in the Foundation's finances. My firm's compliance flagged multiple suspicious transactions, shell accounts, and potential misuse of donor funds. As a responsible partner, I can't blindly commit money without transparency. Gasps and murmurs spread across the auditorium. Vernon visibly reddened, stepping forward from behind the stage's curtain. Calvin continued resolutely, until these irregularities are explained publicly with accountability, I cannot ethically pledge a single dollar. Therefore, no donation from Nightingale and Cross will be forthcoming tonight. He watched the shock ripple. Andrea's face paled, her composure cracking. Arnold stiffened off stage. The detective Pierce looked alert, hand near his phone. Perfect. Pandemonium threatened. The mayor exchanged looks with his staff. Some donors stepped back, whispering in alarm. The media representatives perked up, cameras and phones capturing every second. The hush turned electric, a mass sense that something huge was unfolding. Andrea forced a stunned laugh into the microphone. "Darling, maybe we should—" He gently took the mic again. "Forgive me, Andrea, but I must clarify further. I've discovered not just minor errors, but systematic misappropriation. Significant sums appear to fund personal ventures under the guise of philanthropic expansions. It's possible that certain family members, partners, or staff are involved." A collective gasp. Vernon stormed onto the stage, face livid. He grabbed the mic. "This is insane! Calvin, you're having some breakdown. There's no proof. I demand you retract this slander at once." Calvin calmly pulled out his phone, pressing a button. The large projector screen behind them, initially showing a rotating slideshow of Foundation success stories, abruptly changed. A secure link popped up, revealing transaction logs, shell company names, a concise summary of each suspicious funding route. The crowd gasped again. He spoke into the mic. "This slideshow is courtesy of the firm's compliance records, cross-referenced by external forensic experts. I present it for public scrutiny." He turned to Vernon. "If you can explain these anomalies, I'd be delighted to stand corrected." Vernon's furious glare said it all. Meanwhile, Andrea stared at the screen, mouth slightly open, her eyes darting to Arnold at stage left. Amid the crowd's uproar, the detective Pierce stepped forward, presumably to intervene. Calvin swiftly addressed him. "Detective, interesting to see you here. Perhaps you'd like to weigh in on these findings. This might be in your jurisdiction, correct?" A hush fell, the detective frozen, evidently unprepared for a direct confrontation. If he was in the Claiborne's pocket, this moment put him in an impossible spot. Suddenly, the hush broke into murmurs. Camera flashes erupted. Maribel Cross took advantage, pushing forward with a microphone. "Mr. Nightingale, can you confirm you're alleging major fraud within Aurora Relief Foundation?" He nodded. "I'm confirming the existence of fraudulent transactions. Evidence is being shared with law enforcement." At that statement, a new wave of commotion rose. Then, as if orchestrated, a handful of men in suits parted from the crowd representatives from the state's Financial Crimes Unit, quietly working with Genevieve Price behind the scenes. They approached the stage, carrying official badges, intensifying the drama. Andrea's composure shattered under the spotlight. She clutched Calvin's sleeve. "Cal, what are you doing? You can't do this. You're humiliating us, in front of everyone." He turned to her, voice low enough for only her to hear. "We both know you chose humiliation the moment you and Arnold lied to me. The difference is, I'm doing this for a reason. Justice. You manipulated me for months, no more." Tears gleamed in her eyes, panic crossing her face. She couldn't find a coherent response. Arnold tried stepping forward, bristling. "This is a personal vendetta. You have no right." Calvin met Arnold's gaze with cold fury. "Personal vendetta? Let's talk personal, shall we? I wonder how your real estate expansions thrived off foundation grants, or how your townhouse served as a private tryst spot for you and my wife." That final sentence projected through the mic, thanks to a last-second technical glitch triggered by Vivian Green at the soundboard. The entire audience heard it, prompting gasps of scandal. Cameras zoomed in on Andrea, catching her horrified expression. Arnold paled, sweat beading his forehead. The mayor, unsettled, stepped to the side, conferring with aides. He wanted no part in this meltdown. Judge officials and political figures began discreetly backing away. The aura of unstoppable Claiborne power was crumbling. Vernon hastily grabbed the mic. "Everyone, please remain calm. My son-in-law has clearly misguided some data fiasco. We'll clarify everything. The gala is about helping children in need, not slanderous accusations." The detective Pierce tried to look official, stepping on stage as if to restore order. "Let's all step aside for a moment, investigate these claims in a calm manner." But the large projection screen continued scrolling incriminating data, suspicious bank statements, shell corporations, and transaction IDs linking them to Claiborne affiliates. The hush turned into a fervent mutter of disbelief. Donors realized they might be complicit in a scandal. Politicians realized they'd be on the next bullet of the exposé. Genevieve Price quietly approached from the sidelines, handing Calvin a folder. "It's time," she whispered. He flipped it open, revealing official notarized statements from the Compliance Department and external forensic reviews. Perfect final nails in the coffin. He stepped to the mic again, voice firm. "For those who doubt, these documents are witnessed and notarized. The officials you see here from the Financial Crimes Unit have already begun investigating. This is not a spontaneous accusation. It's a conclusion from weeks of thorough review." A hush so profound that even the classical music in the background seemed distant. Andrea looked ready to faint. Arnold stood stiffly, Vernon's face contorted with rage. Genevieve Claiborne was nowhere to be seen, presumably fleeing. Calvin, glancing at Andrea, continued. "In addition to financial wrongdoing, I regret to confirm something personal. My wife, Andrea, has been unfaithful with Mr. Arnold Weathers for a sustained period. While that might be a private matter, it intersected with the Foundation's financial entanglements, forging questionable deals and forging personal ties that exploited my resources and trust. Now the crowd was abuzz with scandal, both an affair and a massive charity fraud. Cameras snapped incessantly, capturing Andrea's tears, Arnold's mortified expression, and Vernon's impotent fury. Detective Pierce, at a loss, tried again. "All parties, please refrain from further public statements until we handle this matter in a more suitable environment." Maribel Cross began live-streaming her on-the-spot news coverage, seizing the sensational moment. The Financial Crimes Unit stepped forward with their badges raised, politely but firmly requesting cooperation from the Claibornes and Arnold. At that juncture, a cluster of heavily armed private security hired by the Claibornes suddenly stepped from the edges of the venue, presumably to protect the family. Tension skyrocketed. Guests gasped, backing away. But they didn't intervene physically, just formed a ring around Vernon and Andrea as if to guard them. Vernon spat into the mic. "You are making a grave mistake, Calvin. The Claiborne family won't go down like this. We have connections." But the only outcome was to deepen the sense of looming chaos. The detective, evidently compromised, was torn about how to proceed. The financial crimes officials told him to stand down, outranking him in a specialized capacity. From the corner, Calvin glimpsed a confident figure, Vivian Green, speaking quietly into a phone, presumably finalizing the official tipping of state authorities to come in force. The meltdown was unstoppable. One senior official from the state's Financial Crimes Bureau approached the stage with unwavering calm, addressing the crowd. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're sorry for the disruption. We have credible evidence of large-scale fraud within the Aurora Relief Foundation. We must ask key individuals to cooperate with immediate questioning." Vernon's eyes blazed, but he was cornered. Andrea trembled, tears sliding down her cheeks. Arnold looked ready to bolt, but realized he was surrounded by officers. The once mighty Claiborne clan stood exposed under the harsh glare of overhead lights and 100 watchful eyes. Then the crescendo. Maribel Cross's live broadcast soared. Her voice cut through the confusion. "We're reporting live from the Aurora Relief Gala, where major fraud allegations have just been unveiled by Calvin Nightingale. The Claiborne family stands accused, flashes of cameras, scattered shrieks from some older donors, frantic attempts by Arnold to exit. But uniformed officers blocked his path. The fiasco was absolute. Everything Calvin had planned for. He stepped aside, letting the meltdown continue, feeling a mix of triumph and heartbreak. Andrea's wide, desperate eyes sought him out. For a fleeting moment, he saw raw regret, but it was too late. Calvin quietly beckoned Andrea away from the chaos into a side hallway, ignoring her father's shouted protests. She followed, perhaps seeking a last chance to salvage something. The hallway was quieter, though the echoes of pandemonium still reached them. She clutched his arm. "Why? Why would you do this so publicly? We could have resolved it privately, or parted ways without nuclear destruction. You've ruined me. Us. Everything." He studied her tear-stained face, recalling how she once had been the bright star who lit up a room. But illusions break. You ruined it yourself. You lied about your affair, used my resources to finance shady deals, and tried to manipulate me into funding your father's criminal enterprise, all while planning to leave me after you secured my pledge. Did you expect me to quietly fund your treachery? She sobbed softly. I never intended for it to be this ugly. My father demanded certain things, and Arnold made me feel understood. I was suffocating under your perfection, your unstoppable ambition. I wanted out, but we needed your status. We wanted a tidy resolution, not... She gestured helplessly at the fiasco outside. He snorted softly. A tidy resolution where I remain ignorant, or you and Arnold skip away with everything while you claim I was incompetent or unloving. You'd humiliate me eventually. The difference is, I struck first and more completely. She sank to the bench lining the hallway, burying her face in her hands. I loved you once, Calvin, but it changed. He exhaled, memories flashing through his mind. The sweet honeymoon days, her easy laughter, the shared dreams. If you truly once loved me, you'd have come to me honestly. Instead, you orchestrated an affair with Arnold, abetted your father's scheme, and hoped I'd sign a giant check. He paused, voice hardening. I can't pity you, Andrea. Not when dozens, maybe hundreds of families were defrauded under your watch. Not when you used me as a stepping stone for your father's corruption. She looked up, tears streaking her mascara. What happens now? He stepped back. Now, law enforcement decides. As for us, I've filed for divorce. My attorneys will ensure you can't claim ignorance to avoid charges. Unless you cooperate with the investigation, your sentence might be severe. She let out a ragged breath. You're truly this cold? He hesitated. No, I'm just delivering consequences. For me, it's not about hatred. It's about justice. Then he walked away, leaving her in the hush of the corridor, consumed by her own ruin. Back in the main area, Arnold had been temporarily detained by the financial crimes officers for questioning. He raged about unfounded allegations, threatening lawsuits, but it carried no weight in the face of the compiled evidence. Spotting Calvin's return, Arnold tried lunging forward, shouting, "You set me up, you bastard!" The officers restrained him. Calvin met Arnold's furious eyes. I didn't set you up. You did that yourself when you conspired to defraud donors and bed another man's wife. I just revealed it, Arnold snarled. You'll regret this. My connections? Calvin shook his head. Your connections don't outrank federal law. And since I've tracked your every shady real estate deal funded by foundation grants, no threat you make can stop what's coming. Arnold's bravado cracked. He realized the depth of evidence he faced. The meltdown was unstoppable. Several uniformed cops approached, handcuffing him. The assembled crowd parted like a tide, snapping photos. The illusions of high society had collapsed into a spectacle of arrests and revelations. Near the stage, Vernon tried a last attempt at damage control, pressing the detective Pierce to arrest Calvan for public defamation. But the detective was overshadowed by the legitimate state financial crimes unit. They waved Vernon off, ignoring his demands. Cornered, Vernon pointed a trembling finger at Calvan. "Mark my words, you ungrateful wretch. We made you. We can still bury you in countersuits." Calvan quietly handed him a small envelope. "Inside are copies of documents that link you personally to bribery of city officials. Also, evidence your wife used the foundation's funds for personal amusements, forging receipts. If you want to bury me, you'll bury yourself first." Vernon tore the envelope open, skimming a few pages. His face went ashen. He recognized that everything was double-signed, implicating him without an escape route. The father who once boasted unstoppable clout now stood powerless. Calvan turned away, letting the officers handle the rest. As the fiasco reached its peak, half the attendees fled, not wanting to be associated with scandal. The other half remained, transfixed by the real-life drama overshadowing any philanthropic cause. Journalists took notes, broadcasting live updates. Social media exploded with hashtags referencing Claiborne fraud, Gala scandal, and affair unveiled. Genevieve Claiborne, Andrea's mother, tried to slip out quietly but was confronted by an officer who served her an immediate summons for questioning. She collapsed into a faint, revived by paramedics, ensuring the humiliation was complete. Vivian Green discreetly signaled Calvan from across the atrium. "We've triggered the final data release." On overhead monitors, additional slides popped up, detailing the sub-laundering methods, connecting them to shell companies overseas. The entire museum seemed to reel with the weight of revelations. Calvan stepped outside into the rain, needing a breath of fresh air. Sirens wailed as more official vehicles approached. The swirling red and blue lights painted the museum's sleek facade in chaotic color. He felt an odd mixture of triumph and sorrow. 9 years of marriage ended in a public conflagration, but it was necessary to end the lies. The Foundation's illusions had caused real harm, funneling money away from genuine philanthropic needs into the pockets of unscrupulous elites. Maribel Cross emerged from the building, phone in hand. She gave him a quick update. "My live stream went viral. The city is in shock. People are praising you for exposing corruption, but also reeling from the personal drama." He nodded wearily. "It had to happen. Thanks for your part." She touched his shoulder lightly in sympathy. "Take care, Calvan. This story won't quiet down soon." Then she hurried off to continue coverage. He re-entered the building where the remnants of the gala were clearing. Andrea stood near the stage, tear-streaked, trying to speak with an official who was reading her some rights. She caught Calvan's eye, silently pleading once more. The look said everything. Regret, shock, fear. He felt no satisfaction in her breakdown, just a numb acceptance that she had chosen her path. A high-ranking agent from the Financial Crimes Bureau approached Calvan. "Mr. Nightingale, your documentation is invaluable. We'd like you to make a formal statement soon. Also, we might need your testimony if the Claibornes fight in court." Calvan nodded. "Anything needed. I have more backup data if required. Let me know." In a quieter side corridor, Calvan found a moment of solitude. He sank onto a bench, letting out a long breath. Scenes from the night replayed in his mind. Andrea's tears, Arnold's rage, Vernon's threat, the crowd's shock. The sweet taste of revenge was laced with bitterness. He thought back to their wedding day, how naive he had been. He recalled Andrea's laughter when she teased him about his farmland roots. He remembered how her father had sized him up with condescension. Over time, they built a stable facade, but that was all it was, a facade. Now, the facade lay in pieces. The cost was enormous, but he believed it was worth it to uproot corruption. Above all, it was necessary for him to be free of their manipulations. He realized then that while the law would handle the Claiborne's crimes, his personal sense of betrayal would remain. He would need time to heal. That life is gone, replaced by a sharper edge, he was no longer the trusting, upwardly mobile spouse. He was a man who had methodically burned the illusions around him to carve out truth. His phone buzzed, a message from Vivian Green. "Leaving the venue. Enforcement is taking over. Congratulations, Calvin." "You did it." He typed back a simple, "Thank you for everything." He also saw a message from Genevieve Price. "The city's entire philanthropic circle is in uproar. Investors are pulling out of Claiborne-related funds. The meltdown is unstoppable." He set the phone aside, letting the gravity of the moment settle. He had planned meticulously for months, but the emotional weight still pressed on him. He'd undone the Claiborne empire in one evening, exposing Andrea's betrayal, shattering Arnold's facade. Humbling Vernon's arrogance, he considered. Could the Claibornes attempt to strike back? Possibly. But with law enforcement so deeply involved, their options were limited. The Detective Pierce might try to salvage them, but the overwhelming evidence left no room for false arrests or cover-ups. Calvin had planned for that too, establishing multiple kill switches that would automatically release more evidence if he was harmed or legally threatened. Chapter 6. The immediate morning after the gala, local news coverage dominated the city's headlines. Every outlet splashed pictures of an emotional Andrea, an enraged Vernon, and an arrested Arnold. The overarching narrative was sensational. Top family's charity a fraud. Triumphant gala ends in handcuffs. The personal dimension of Andrea's affair with Arnold also fueled tabloid excitement, overshadowing even the financial scandal in some gossip columns. Calvin woke in the hush of his city apartment, eyes gritty from lack of sleep. He flicked on the TV to see a replay of his own speech, the dramatic moment where he withdrew the pledge, the gasps from the audience, and glimpses of Andrea's horrified expression. The anchor discussed new revelations that the Aurora Relief Foundation might have laundered millions. Then they cut to an image of Andrea's tear-stained face. The humiliated gala organizer. He turned off the TV, exhaling wearily. No turning back. Part of him felt a hollow ache. For all her betrayal, Andrea had been a significant part of his life. But she had forced him into a corner. He resolved to handle the aftermath with the same calm thoroughness he'd shown at the gala. By mid-morning, a swirl of legal processes began. The city's district attorney held a press conference confirming they had opened formal investigations into the Claiborne family's foundation operations. The mayor expressed shock, claiming ignorance, anxious to distance himself from the fiasco. Agents from the Financial Crimes Bureau requested a meeting with Calvin at their headquarters. He complied, accompanied by a specialized attorney from his firm. The city's district attorney held a press conference early that morning, confirming that formal investigations into the Claiborne family and the Aurora Relief Foundation were underway. The Financial Crimes Bureau had already begun reviewing the voluminous data Calvin and his allies had provided. Outside the courthouse, reporters clamored for any statement from the Claiborne clan. But as of yet, no one from that family dared show their face publicly. Calvin spent that mid-morning at his Nightingale and Cross Capitol office, preparing for a scheduled meeting with the Bureau's agents. His usually calm staff buzzed with quiet awe. They had seen the news footage from the gala of him standing on stage, dismantling the Claiborne empire with a few well-chosen words and damning evidence. Now, the name Calvin Nightingale was on every major news channel, praised by some as a crusader for truth, condemned by others as an opportunist who had chosen the nuclear option. He was finalizing documents on his computer when Genevieve Price knocked softly on the door and slipped inside. The tall analyst wore a grave expression. "Mr. Nightingale?" she said, voice subdued. "I just spoke to the district attorney's liaison. They want to confirm you'll appear for an initial deposition tomorrow. They'll provide witness protection if needed." Calvin nodded. "Tell them I'll appear. No protection is necessary for now." He tapped a pen on the desk. "What's the climate in the firm?" "Mixed, sir," Genevieve said carefully. "Most respect your integrity, but some fear reprisals from the Claiborne side if they try to drag the firm into lawsuits. A few senior partners are concerned about any blowback from the philanthropic community, but the majority stand by you. The Claiborne's corruption was too blatant." He exhaled. "I appreciate the update. Once I finish with the Bureau, I'll address the entire firm. We'll stand on the right side of the law." Genevieve nodded. "Understood." Then she hesitated. "I overheard that Andrea tried to call you. Did you see those messages?" He paused. Indeed, he'd noticed a few missed calls and voicemails from Andrea, who had apparently been released pending further questioning. The Bureau presumably found enough probable cause to charge her, but not enough to detain her outright, unless new evidence surfaced. "I saw them," he replied. "I have nothing to say to her right now." Genevieve left, and Calvin stared at the phone on his desk. Every beep of a notification felt like an echo in a chamber of regrets. But regrets were a luxury he couldn't afford. He had to see this through. That afternoon, Calvin arrived at the Massachusetts Financial Crimes Bureau building. The structure was utilitarian, gray concrete, narrow windows, a stark contrast to the museum's elegant facade from the night before. He brought along an attorney from Nightingale and Cross's legal counsel, Marcus Howell, who had experience in handling high-profile financial investigations. Inside a secure conference room, 2 agents greeted him. Special Agent Rhonda Clark, a poised woman in her 40s with a reputation for thoroughness, and Agent Damon Lee, a meticulous financial analyst who had been quietly working behind the scenes. Agent Clark began. "Mr. Nightingale, we appreciate your cooperation. The evidence you presented at the gala was extraordinary. One rarely sees such a public unveiling of complex fraud. We have initial questions, then we'll likely need you for follow-up depositions." Marcus, Calvin's attorney, nodded politely. "My client is ready to answer fully. He's prepared to disclose all data in his possession." They sat around a large metal table. On it lay the thick folders and digital drives Calvin had provided, along with official documents from Genevieve Price's compilation. Agent Clark leaned forward. "First, let's establish a timeline. How long have you suspected wrongdoing by the Claiborne family and the Aurora Relief Foundation?" Calvin folded his hands. "My earliest suspicions arose a few months ago, initially for personal reasons. Then, noticing financial anomalies, I engaged discreet external forensic experts. They cross-referenced internal data from my firm's compliance department with external records. The last few weeks confirmed the scope of the fraud." Agent Lee scribbled notes. "And can you confirm that you had no direct knowledge or involvement in setting up these shell companies or forging documents?" "Absolutely none," Calvin replied evenly. "As soon as I discovered suspicious transactions, I moved to gather proof and then disclose it." Marcus Howell spoke softly. He has documented each step, including the times and dates he discovered each piece of evidence. The chain of custody is transparent. Agent Clark looked at Calvin thoughtfully. Your wife, Andrea Claiborne Nightingale, is listed as a signatory on numerous Foundation sub-accounts. In your view, was she aware of their illicit nature? Calvin hesitated, recalling that chilling memory of reading Andrea's emails, how deeply she was implicated. While I don't have definitive proof of her state of mind, the evidence strongly suggests she knowingly signed off on transactions that were not aligned with true philanthropic work. Whether she was fully aware they were illegal or simply obeying her father's instructions, I can't say. But ignorance at that scale is unlikely. Agent Lee nodded. You realize this could lead to charges against your wife as well. Are you prepared for that personally? Calvin steeled himself. It pains me, but yes, I am prepared. The truth must out. No exceptions. The interview went on for hours. Clark and Lee asked granular questions about the data, verifying whether Calvin had reason to suspect anything earlier. He explained how the Claibornes shielded the Foundation under an aura of respectability, how Andrea's personal involvement had been hidden behind legit-sounding philanthropic jargon. By the end, the agent seemed satisfied that Calvin was the whistleblower, not an accomplice. Marcus Howell coordinated steps for turning in additional backups. The Bureau scheduled a formal deposition for the following week. We appreciate your courage, Agent Clark said. This is not a small matter. The Claibornes are influential, but the evidence is overwhelming. Calvin rose, shaking their hands. I just want accountability. They can't use wealth and status to dodge the law forever. He left the building, the afternoon sun bright yet cold against the city's winter chill. On his phone, a flurry of missed calls from unknown numbers, some likely reporters, others, maybe associates. He ignored them for now. Walking back to his car, Calvin became aware of a presence behind him. Turning, he saw Detective Randall Pierce leaning against a lamppost, as though waiting. The detective's posture was tense, face grim. You sure stirred up a storm, Pierce remarked quietly when Calvin drew near. Calvin kept walking. Guilty parties are the ones who stirred it, Detective. I just exposed it. Pierce fell in step beside him. The Claibornes claim you orchestrated this fiasco for personal revenge. They say you're using unverified data to smear them. Calvin glanced at him sidelong. Don't you have the official data by now? The Bureau has it. If you're truly an honest cop, you'll see it's verified. Pierce's lips thinned. I serve the city. If the city sees you as a hero, that's fine. But some powerful interests are displeased. You might watch your back. Calvin recognized the undertone, a veiled threat, or perhaps a caution. Is that your personal advice or the Claibornes' message? Pierce looked away. Take it as you will. My job is complicated. I'd rather not see more blood spilled in this. You've done enough damage, and the Claibornes are cornered animals. Cornered animals can lash out. Calvin didn't flinch. I've prepared contingencies. If anything happens to me or my associates, the full weight of the evidence goes public. They'll lose even the possibility of plea bargains. Pierce gave a slow nod, acknowledging the cunning behind Calvin's plan. Then, good luck with your next moves. He turned and walked off, leaving Calvin uneasy but resolute. He climbed into his car, pondering the detective's words. The Claibornes might indeed lash out in desperation. He resolved to remain vigilant. That same evening, Calvin received a text from an unexpected sender, Arnold Weathers. It read, "Meet me at the old waterfront, 10 p.m. I'll come alone." Why would Arnold request a private meeting after such a public downfall, possibly to beg or threaten? Calvin debated ignoring him, but curiosity and strategic advantage prevailed. If Arnold intended some final gambit, Calvin preferred to face it head-on. At 10 p.m., the waterfront was quiet, lit by sparse street lamps reflecting off the dark water. Calvin parked discreetly, ensuring he wasn't followed. The chill in the air matched the tension as he walked along the dock. Arnold stood near the water's edge, coat collar turned up, eyes flicking about warily. When Calvin approached, Arnold turned with a subdued glare. "Why come alone? Not afraid I'll do something?" Calvin shrugged. "I trust my precautions. If you harm me, you sign your own death warrant metaphorically or literally." Arnold scoffed. "Typical. You always had contingencies. That's what made you dangerous. More dangerous than we realized." Silence stretched for a moment, the water lapping at the pilings. Finally, Arnold's voice dropped. "We're both losing. The Claibornes are finished. This scandal ensures my own downfall, my real estate ventures poisoned by your revelations. No bank will touch me now." Calvin studied him. "You reaped ill-gotten gains from the foundation, seduced my wife, and conspired to keep me ignorant. Pardon me if my sympathy is limited." Arnold sighed, tension in his shoulders. "I approached you so we can talk sense. Maybe we can present a united front. We were both duped by the Claibornes. That might mitigate our damage." Calvin's mouth twitched in amusement. "That's quite the rewrite of history. You're forgetting the part where you actively colluded with them and the part where you bedded my wife behind my back." Arnold's expression tightened. "I regret that. But you must see. Andrea felt unloved by you, overshadowed by your ambition." She turned to me. "I didn't plan to hurt you personally, it just happened." The wind whipped across the dock, rippling the water. Calvin's voice was calm but edged with finality. "You want me to join you in spinning a narrative that you were unwitting stooges of Vernon Claiborne, that Andrea is an innocent victim. Sorry, but I won't lie. That was your approach from the start, relying on illusions, deception. I prefer the truth." Arnold's frustration showed. "Then we'll all sink. You realize that if Andrea is charged with felonies, she might drag you down too, claiming you knew everything." Calvin gave a dismissive half-laugh. "Let her try. The evidence shows otherwise. I documented each step. That's the difference. You hid behind illusions. I recorded facts." Arnold cursed under his breath. "You're an ice-cold bastard, do you know that?" Calvin regarded him steadily. "Perhaps, but an honest one. Our conversation is over, Arnold. Surrender to the authorities or keep squirming. Either way, your role is exposed." He turned and walked away, leaving Arnold by the dark water, fear and anger etched in his face. Calvin felt no triumph, only a grim satisfaction that the final illusions between them were shattered. Over the next week, the media frenzy refused to die. Investigative reporters uncovered more skeletons, a questionable property in the Caribbean that Vernon had hidden, Genevieve Claiborne's lavish overseas charity tours costing millions, and evidence that Andrea's lavish lifestyle designer wardrobes, expensive jewelry, were bankrolled by foundation money marked as operational costs. Each revelation sparked new public outrage. With each scandalous headline, the Claiborne family's social standing plummeted. Their longtime allies deserted them, frightened by the stench of criminal charges. Judge acquaintances, old political connections, even wealthy donors wanted no association with the fiasco. Public sympathy for Andrea was mixed. Some tabloids painted her as a pitiful figure undone by scandal. Others labeled her a cunning accomplice to her father's empire. None of it changed the fact that the district attorney was building a strong case. Andrea faced potential charges of conspiracy to commit fraud, among others. Meanwhile, Calvin pressed forward. He gave a formal statement at a hearing, reiterating how he discovered the foundation's illegal transactions and the internal forging of documents. The district attorney praised his actions as whistleblowing, awarding him moral high ground in the public eye. While some circles suspected him of orchestrating a personal vendetta, the mountain of corroborating data made it clear that wrongdoing was real and vast. The court issued warrants for certain Claiborne accounts, freezing them. Vernon's lawyers tried to file injunctions, but the judge denied them, citing strong evidence. This left the Claibornes practically penniless in terms of liquid assets, reliant on whatever small capital they'd hidden well or managed to keep untraceable. Rumors circulated that they were attempting to sell personal heirlooms to cover legal fees. For a family once revered for generational wealth, it was a staggering downfall. One morning, Calvin was at his firm's private office preparing for a meeting. The receptionist called, "Sir, your wife is here." He froze, heart thudding with a complex swirl of emotions. He had refused her calls, but apparently she'd chosen to show up in person. He instructed the receptionist to let her in. Moments later, Andrea entered, looking hollowed out, pale, eyes rimmed with dark circles. She wore simple clothes, a far cry from her usual glamorous attire. The sight pricked an ache of memory, but he steeled himself. Andrea's voice quivered. "Calvin, I can't believe how everything fell apart so fast. I lost everything, my job prospects, my father's support, my mother's in meltdown. The press hounds me. And the DA might indict me soon. Please, can we talk?" He gestured for her to sit, keeping his expression neutral. "Talk, then." She sank into the chair across from his large desk, tears threatening to surface. "I'm sorry. I know you have no reason to believe me, but I never wanted it to escalate. Dad pushed me into using foundation funds. Arnold kept promising we'd fix it later. I just let them manipulate me." She pressed shaking hands together. "Yes, I had an affair. I betrayed you. I was lonely. I was stupid. Now I'm facing prison. Please, can you help me, Calvin? You have so much influence." He studied her, remembering the nights he suspected her lying, the months of secret signals with Arnold. "Help you? After you deceived me? Used me? And publicly humiliated me? And let's not forget your father threatened me repeatedly. You want me to intervene so you face fewer legal consequences?" She lowered her gaze. "Yes. I'm begging you. I'm willing to do anything. Sign over property, disclaim inheritance, publicly apologize, whatever it takes. I just can't bear prison." He inhaled slowly, controlling a surge of conflicting feelings. Part of him recalled the woman he loved once. Another part remembered the unstoppable wave of betrayal. "Andrea, it's beyond my power to simply wave away felony charges. The evidence is with the district attorney. Unless you have something major to offer, like testifying fully against your father and Arnold." She blinked. "They'd disown me if I turn on them. But if it's the only way, I might. Could you talk to the DA and arrange a plea, some lesser charge in exchange for my cooperation? They'd listen to you." Her voice held desperate hope. He leaned back, crossing his arms. "I can see if they'll let you do a proffer session. But let's be clear. That means you admit guilt, you name names, you tell them everything. No half-truths. If you hold back, they'll tear you apart." She nodded frantically. "I'll do it, please. I can't handle the alternative." Tears trickled down her cheeks. "Cal, if there's any shred of empathy left in you, please help me not go to jail for decades. I know I hurt you, but—" He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. "You ask for empathy. Where was your empathy when you planned to humiliate me after the gala? Or when you lied about your fertility struggles? Or when you siphoned money with your father? If I help you, it's because I want justice to be thorough, not because I condone what you did." He exhaled. "I'll inform the DA you want a cooperation deal. That's all I'll do. The rest is on you." Andrea rose from the chair, tears unabated. "Thank you, I'm so sorry, Calvin." He gave no response, merely gesturing toward the door. "Go. My attorney will be in touch about the formalities. Then we finalize the divorce. We're done, Andrea." She left, shoulders shaking. Calvin clenched his fist behind his back, forcing himself to remain stoic. No matter how pitiful she looked, her choices had wrought this. He refused to waver. Chapter 7. Within days, Andrea's attorney contacted Calvin's legal counsel, confirming Andrea's willingness to testify. The district attorney set up a queen-for-a-day proffer session. If Andrea provided substantial incriminating testimony against Vernon and Arnold, she might get reduced charges. Word of her potential betrayal spread quickly, causing further rifts within the Claiborne family. Vernon, for his part, launched public statements decrying Calvin's treachery, claiming the entire meltdown was orchestrated from a personal vendetta. But the public mood had shifted. The unstoppable evidence overshadowed Vernon's denials. Meanwhile, the city's philanthropic scene was in chaos. Several charities that Claiborne family members had touched came under scrutiny. Even legitimate projects found donors fleeing. In an ironic twist, some of the truly needy programs risked losing funds because everyone was spooked by association. Distressed by that unintended harm, Calvin announced that Nightingale and Cross would assist unaffected charities with strict oversight, demonstrating his commitment to real philanthropy. This gesture improved his public image further as a man who, while exposing corruption, still cared about genuine charitable endeavors. Calvin's attorney, Marcus Howell, invited him to observe, through a one-way mirror, Andrea's proffer session with the district attorney. He agreed, wanting to see if Andrea told the whole truth or tried to minimize her guilt. Sitting behind the glass, he watched Andrea, flanked by her lawyer, face the DA and two agents. She looked exhausted, wearing simple clothes, no makeup, hair pulled back. Gone was the glamorous hostess from the Gala. Her voice wavered as she detailed how the foundation siphoned money into hidden accounts to finance personal ventures, real estate deals, and hush payments. She implicated Vernon as the mastermind, Arnold as the key implementer, and her mother Genevieve as a complicit enabler. However, she attempted to skirt her own accountability, painting herself as naive, coerced by her father. Calvin frowned, knowing from the stored emails that Andrea had shown more initiative than she claimed. The DA pressed her for details about forging documents with her signature, especially where she directly authorized suspicious wire transfers. Andrea deflected, claiming she didn't read them carefully, trusting her father's direction. Marcus Howell whispered to Calvin, "She's half lying. The DA can't be that naive." Calvin nodded. "They'll cross-check her statements with the evidence we provided." Indeed, after Andrea concluded her narrative, Agent Clark confronted her with specifics from the data logs, showing timestamps of her repeated logins to certain shell account portals. Andrea's face paled as it became clear she couldn't feign total ignorance. She broke down in tears, finally admitting she might have known. The money was being diverted for questionable uses. The DA signaled the session to pause, stating they'd evaluate whether her partial admissions sufficed for a cooperation deal. Calvin observed from behind the glass, heart heavy. Even in confession, Andrea tried to minimize her complicity, but any illusions of innocence were shattered. The legal machinery would grind out the truth. Shortly after Andrea's proffer session, a new wave of drama erupted. Vernon Claiborne, feeling cornered, started aggressively countersuing Calvin for defamation and tortious interference, claiming that Calvin had fabricated evidence. The lawsuit demanded massive damages. The media labeled it a desperate last-ditch move. Marcus Howell assured Calvin, "Given the avalanche of corroborating proof, Vernon's lawsuit is baseless. but it can still cause headaches. Calvin merely said, "Let him try. Our evidence stands. The Bureau's investigation overrides civil suits." Behind the scenes, rumors suggested Vernon was trying to buy time or scare Calvin into dropping further revelations. Some whispered that Vernon might attempt to skip the country, but with his accounts frozen and his passport flagged, escape was nearly impossible. Meanwhile, Arnold had gone silent after the fiasco. The DA indicated he, too, might consider flipping on Vernon, seeking a plea bargain. The Claiborne empire was fracturing from within, each member scurrying to save themselves. Late one evening, Calvin found himself alone at his city apartment, gazing over the skyline. A year ago, he had everything: a stable, if sometimes hollow, marriage, acceptance among high society, a thriving firm. Now, he was a man who'd deliberately shattered that stability, exposing corruption at a high personal cost. He felt relief, but also an ache for a simpler life that might never return. His phone beeped a message from an unknown number. "They might have one last card to play. Don't let your guard down." Possibly the same ally who had warned him before. He typed, "Any specifics?" No reply. This gnawing sense of danger lingered, though he doubted the Claibornes could do more than empty threats now. 2 days later, while driving home from the firm after a late meeting with potential new philanthropic partners, a black SUV swerved aggressively behind Calvin on a quiet stretch of road. The SUV tailed him uncomfortably close. Instinct prickling, Calvin sped up slightly. The SUV accelerated, attempting to draw alongside him. He recalled the detective's words about cornered animals, possibly an intimidation tactic, or worse. Calmly, Calvin engaged some advanced driving maneuvers. He had once taken a defensive driving course. He flicked into a different lane, forcing the SUV behind a slow truck. Then he took a random exit, looping onto a well-lit road near a public station. The SUV dropped back and vanished. He parked for a moment, heart pounding. A near accident? An attempt to run him off the road? Or just a scare tactic? He informed Vivian Green and Marcus Howell of the incident, then drove home via a different route. If they thought to intimidate him physically, they'd find he was prepared. Cameras on his vehicle's dash might have captured the SUV's plates he'd passed the data to the Bureau. This incident reaffirmed that the Claibornes or their minions might still lash out violently. Chapter 8. In the days following the near road rage incident, the district attorney's office accelerated the timeline. Evidence from Andrea's partial confession, plus the trove from Calvin, Genevieve Price, and Vivian Green, painted a massive, irrefutable picture of corruption. Indictments landed swiftly. Vernon Claiborne was formally charged with multiple counts of grand larceny, fraud, money laundering, and bribery. Arnold faced conspiracy to commit fraud, money laundering, and wire fraud. Andrea was indicted on conspiracy charges, though the DA recommended a reduced sentence if she fully cooperated. Public reaction ranged from shock to schadenfreude. The once revered Claiborne name was in tatters. Every day, new details of lavish spending and manipulative dealings hit the headlines. The philanthropic world severed all ties to them. Even close family friends publicly condemned them. Some speculated how the Claiborne estate might be seized or forced into bankruptcy for restitution. A hush fell over Calvin's apartment one evening when his building security phoned up, announcing that Andrea was in the lobby, requesting a private meeting. Despite reservations, Calvin decided to let her come up, but only after ensuring 2 discreet security staff stood by. The attempt on his life, if that's what the SUV incident was, had made him careful. When Andrea arrived, her appearance was heartbreakingly different from the poised socialite. She wore plain jeans, a sweater, no makeup, hair plainly tied. She clutched a folder. Her eyes were red, cheeks sunken. The transformation from last month's glamorous hostess was stark. He let her step into his living room. She gazed around, noticing how minimalistic it was compared to the lavish townhouse they once shared. She swallowed hard. We lost the townhouse to the bank. Dad defaulted on the mortgage. Everything's unraveling. Calvin stood at a cautious distance. I heard. The system is thorough. She sniffled. I know you probably hate me, but I needed to see you. I want to apologize properly. Not for the legal part, I deserve whatever penalty the court decides, but for how I used you, lied about the IVF, the affair. I was blind, letting Dad steer my life. I wanted acceptance, money, status. But you gave me real love once, and I squandered it. He studied her quietly. Apology accepted, in the sense that I'm not holding personal vendettas. But it doesn't change the consequences, nor does it negate the damage done to others. And you know we can't restore what we had. She nodded, tears spilling. I know. I lost that chance. I just wanted you to hear me say it. I'm sorry. I regret hurting you more than I can express. She extended the folder shakily. These are some personal diaries I kept. I wrote about my guilt, confusion. It's probably worthless, but maybe it'll help you see that I did love you. Even if I failed, I'll leave them with you. He hesitated, then accepted the folder. All right. I appreciate the gesture. She lingered, as if hoping for some crumb of comfort. What's next for you? The city calls you a hero. You're free from the Claibornes. Are you planning to remain in philanthropic circles or... He exhaled. I'll keep running my firm, possibly intensify focus on legitimate philanthropic partnerships, ones that truly help people. As for you, I guess your immediate future involves cooperating with the DA, to minimize your sentence. She winced. Yes, I might get probation or a short prison term if they accept my full cooperation. I'll do it. For once telling the truth. Then, with a trembling voice, would you ever consider visiting me if I end up behind bars, just so I'm not completely alone in the world? A pang speared Calvin's heart. Despite everything, she was a human being who was once his wife. He considered it. I can't promise. It depends on circumstances. Let's see how events unfold. A ghost of a sad smile crossed her face. That's more than I deserve. Thank you. Farewell, Calvin. She turned and left, shoulders slumped, escorted by the silent security staff. The door clicked shut behind her, finalizing the chapter of illusions and betrayal. Calvin remained standing, the folder of her diaries in hand, feeling the weight of 9 years. The quiet felt deafening. In the following weeks, the legal machine rolled inexorably forward. Vernon's countersuit was dismissed by a judge who cited overwhelming evidence of the Claibornes' wrongdoing. The grand jury indicted both Vernon and Arnold, setting a trial date. Andrea's plea deal was shaping up with potential for a reduced sentence, conditional on her comprehensive testimony. Genevieve Claiborne, Andrea's mother, also faced charges, though lesser. She had fled to a distant relative's estate, but the DA compelled her return. The entire family faced public scorn. Their extended relatives cut ties, unwilling to be dragged into the scandal. The on-sea-lionized Claiborne name was now an emblem of hypocrisy, a cautionary tale in every Boston parlor. One surprising development. The detective Pierce turned whistleblower, revealing he had been on the Claiborne payroll to quietly manage potential legal threats. Pressured by the unstoppable wave of evidence, he cut a deal to expose further bribes in the city's police department. This triggered additional turmoil, but also reinforced the unstoppable momentum of justice. The district attorney announced a major press conference to detail the scope of the Claiborne indictments. Calvin was invited to speak as the initial whistleblower, He agreed, seeing it as a chance to clarify any questions and ensure the city recognized the broader moral of the story, that corruption can hide behind philanthropic facades, and vigilance is essential. On a crisp morning outside the courthouse, cameras lined the steps. The DA praised Calvin for courageous disclosure of the Claiborne scheme, citing it as an example of how one individual's stand against wrongdoing can uproot powerful families. Calvin himself gave a brief statement. "I acted not from personal revenge, though the personal betrayal was real, but from the conviction that no social status or wealth can place one above the law. The Aurora Relief Foundation was meant to serve communities in need, but it became a tool of manipulation. Let's ensure we support genuine charities going forward." The press swallowed his words eagerly. Some tried to pry into personal details about Andrea's affair or his emotional toll. Calvin politely but firmly deflected, stating that his private grievances were secondary to the public interest. He had done enough public unveiling for a lifetime. Following the collapse of the Aurora Relief Foundation, a group of smaller but sincere charities seized the opportunity to fill the vacuum. Calvin, wanting to restore faith in philanthropy, spearheaded an initiative at Nightingale and Cross to vet these nonprofits thoroughly and channel major corporate donations. Partnerships blossomed. The city's philanthropic scene, once dominated by the Claibornes, found new leadership. Vivian Green played a significant role here, advising on internal audits for each charity to ensure no repeat of the fiasco. The City Council also passed stricter oversight laws, partially influenced by Calvin's push for transparency. In that sense, a positive outcome emerged from the rubble. Local activists hailed Calvin's intervention as a turning point, calling it the Nightingale Reforms, echoing the philanthropic codes that replaced the Claiborne-era duplicity. He never sought such recognition, he only wanted rightful accountability, but he accepted that a beneficial legacy had been forged from his painful personal ordeal. Arnold ultimately caved to pressure, trying to strike a plea deal. He offered to surrender additional documents proving Vernon's deeper conspiracies, bribery of foreign officials, offshore real estate expansions. The DA cautiously negotiated. In the end, Arnold was slapped with multiple charges but might see a moderate prison term if he fully cooperated. His personal wealth was seized to repay defrauded donors. Ruined socially and financially, he faced the bitter reality that no hush money remained to protect him. Meanwhile, his affair with Andrea was overshadowed by the larger scandal. Tabloids occasionally churned out lurid stories, but the public's attention shifted to the broader corruption. Arnold's name became a footnote, overshadowed by the Claiborne patriarch's downfall. Under the plea deal, Andrea provided extensive testimony detailing how her father orchestrated the foundation's finances, how Arnold leveraged adoption funds for personal real estate, how multiple city officials received donation-based bribes. She admitted forging some documents, though she tried to spin it as under duress. The district attorney weighed her cooperation favorably, offering a recommended sentence of a few years in minimum security, assuming the judge concurred. She might get out sooner on good behavior, with heavy probation. In tearful interviews, she expressed remorse, though many in the city believed she was only sorry because she was caught. Some close acquaintances pitied her downfall, recalling how overshadowed she'd been by her father's domineering persona. Others declared her a social climber who got her comeuppance. Calvin, despite the personal pain, did not contest her plea deal. He recognized that her testimony was crucial to ensuring the entire Claiborne empire faced full justice. For that, he was willing to see her punishment lessened, so the bigger fish, particularly Vernon, would be irrevocably snared. The day Vernon Claiborne's trial began, reporters thronged the courthouse steps. Dwindling supporters of the once powerful judge socialite father found nothing to cling to after the overwhelming proof of money laundering, bribery, and conspiracy. Despite his forceful denials, the evidence was insurmountable. Mid-trial, faced with a guaranteed guilty verdict, Vernon's legal team tried to negotiate a final plea. The DA refused leniency. This man had threatened officials, manipulated charities, and laundered millions across continents. The city demanded an example. In a dramatic twist on the second day of the trial, Vernon attempted a meltdown in court, shouting that he was the victim of a witch hunt, orchestrated by unscrupulous outsiders pointing the finger at Calvin again. The judge, unimpressed, threatened contempt. Vernon's meltdown only served to confirm the perception of him as a corrupt, deluded man, unable to face reality. The court found him guilty on multiple counts, sentencing him to a lengthy prison term that effectively ended the Claiborne dynasty. Genevieve Claiborne also pled guilty to lesser charges of conspiracy and received a combination of house arrest and substantial fines. She retreated from public life entirely, an outcast in her own social circles. Amid the unfolding legal consequences, Calvin found a measure of closure. He had systematically dismantled the Claiborne empire, exposed Andrea's affair, and prevented further exploitation of philanthropic donors. Publicly lauded as a whistleblower, privately he bore scars from the personal betrayals. Yet, he had chosen this path with eyes wide open. Nightingale and Cross flourished. Freed from the shadow of Claiborne interference, it attracted new, reputable clients eager to invest with a man who had proved unwavering integrity. Corporate boards sought his counsel on compliance. He also formed a specialized philanthropic advisory division, ensuring no charity endowment repeated the Aurora fiasco. The city approached him about serving on a newly formed Ethics in Philanthropy Commission. After some hesitation, he accepted only on the condition that it remained truly independent, with robust oversight powers. He wanted to ensure real reforms, not cosmetic ones. The city council agreed, enshrining measures that would outlast any single scandal. Through it all, Calvin stayed in contact with Vivian Green and Genevieve Price, who became key parts of his philanthropic advisory team. They helped vet nonprofits, ensuring legitimate operations while championing transparency. The city gradually regained trust in charitable work, forging a better philanthropic ecosystem from the ashes of Claiborne corruption. Weeks after Vernon's sentencing, Calvin received a short letter from Andrea, postmarked from a minimum security women's facility upstate. The letter was succinct, expressing sorrow for the pain she inflicted, gratitude for him not blocking her plea deal, and acknowledging she'd live with regret for her betrayal. She mentioned she hoped one day, when she was out, to rebuild her life honestly. Calvin read it in silence. The old ache stirred, but no tears came. He penned a brief reply, wishing her the resolve to reform and letting her know he held no personal vendetta anymore. The rest was up to her. He mailed it without fanfare. In a final twist of personal closure, Calvin, months later, visited that small bookstore where he and Andrea once spent a lazy afternoon in their happier early marriage days. He found it nearly deserted. On a nostalgic whim, he picked up an old volume on ethical leadership. Flipping through it, he realized how ironically apt it was the principle that real leadership is tested by the willingness to expose wrongdoing even if it costs you personally. He bought the book, reflecting that though he lost a marriage and a place in certain high society circles, he gained a clear conscience, a stronger business, and a city's renewed philanthropic moral compass. That was a trade he could live with. In the subsequent months, as the court cases concluded, the dust settled. Andrea served her sentence with partial remission due to cooperation. Arnold likewise faced a prison term. Vernon languished in a federal penitentiary, stripped of all illusions. The Claiborne mansion was sold at auction, and the name Claiborne no longer conjured respect, but rather cautionary tales at dinner parties. Calvin advanced a newly minted philanthropic network, ironically fulfilling what the Aurora Relief Foundation pretended to do, helping actual communities in need. Donors entrusted him with oversight, confident he would sniff out any corruption. Vivian Green and Genevieve Price stayed at his side, forming a core team. The city recognized them as a triad of reformers. The highlight, a new Unity Child Fund they launched, ensuring direct accountability, zero tolerance for shady dealings. Their first project was building schools in underprivileged neighborhoods, a genuine cause that garnered broad support. International philanthropic bodies invited Calvin to speak about transparent governance in charities. He found himself addressing global summits, ironically stepping onto the philanthropic stage that Andrea once claimed. But he carried genuine commitment. The story of how he dismantled Aurora Relief's fraudulent empire and replaced it with real service resonated worldwide. He was living proof that a single determined individual with resources, cunning, and moral conviction could topple powerful dynasties built on lies. Late one afternoon, as the sky glowed with a soft orange hue, Calvin stood on a balcony overlooking the city skyline. The chaos had settled. The Claibornes faced their punishments. Aurora Relief was replaced by a legitimate structure. He had survived betrayal, orchestrated a grand revenge, yet also triggered real positive change. He thought of the life lessons gleaned, that no matter how high society's veneer, corruption can lurk beneath. That love can be eroded by deception, but sometimes one must break illusions to find truth. The price was heartbreak and social scandal, but the reward was integrity and a revived philanthropic sector that truly served the public good. The phone buzzed. A text from Maribel Cross. Just published a follow-up piece on the new philanthropic wave. Thought you'd like it. We still get calls from around the world wanting to replicate your oversight model. Congratulations, Calvin. You did it. He smiled, recalling that everything had started from a simple suspicion about Andrea's affair. It grew into a larger mission, unveiling rot in a revered family. He typed a reply. Thank you, Maribel. Here's to building something better from the ruins. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Calvin breathed in the cool air, feeling a sense of finality. Part 2 of his story concluded with the Claibornes undone, Andrea paying her dues, and a city's philanthropic culture reshaped. Yet the scars of betrayal lingered, a reminder that illusions are fragile, and that ultimate victory often exacts a personal cost. Chapter 9. A brisk autumn wind swept across the courthouse steps, scattering leaves of yellow and red. Reporters and curious onlookers gathered by the tall columns, waiting for the final phase of the Claiborne trials to commence. Though most charges against Vernon, Andrea, and Arnold had been established, the formal sentencing hearing promised a last round of public drama. Calvin Nightingale, clad in a dark suit, arrived early that morning. He paused at the top of the courthouse stairs, gazing at the familiar marble facade where so many key moments had unfolded. The swirl of cameras captured his entrance, a hush falling among the assembled crowd. Some recognized him as the whistleblower who'd dismantled an influential family's empire. Others saw him as the scorned husband seeking justice. Either way, he had become a central figure in the city's biggest scandal in decades. He made his way inside, accompanied by his attorney, Marcus Howell, who carried a folder of final statements in case the court called upon Calvin for any concluding remarks. They proceeded to the assigned courtroom, a high-ceilinged chamber adorned with historical murals. Already, half the seats were filled with press, city officials, philanthropic figures, and others with personal interest in the fate of the Claibornes. As the session began, Judge Murdoch presided, known for a no-nonsense approach. The prosecution table was staffed by a small team from the district attorney's office, while the defense tables were scattered with Claiborne lawyers. Vernon Claiborne, once imposing, sat hunched in a rumpled suit, his hair grayer than before, his face deeply lined by stress. Andrea Claiborne, still using the married name in legal documents, looked frail, wearing a simple blouse, hair unstyled. She avoided eye contact with the crowd, focusing on her folded hands. Arnold Weathers sat slightly apart, his posture tense, presumably having made a separate plea arrangement from Vernon. The charges had been proven in prior proceedings. This session focused on sentencing. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation, everyone wanting to see if the once mighty Claibornes would face a harsh punishment or manage some last-minute leniency. A final, unexpected participant entered, Judge Ramirez from a different circuit, who had apparently come as a character witness for the Foundation, citing its few legitimate achievements. The court allowed him to speak briefly, but the prosecution objected, labeling it a token attempt to salvage the Claibornes' public image. It was dismissed as irrelevant to the sentencing because the severity of fraud overshadowed any legitimate philanthropic successes. Vernon's lead counsel delivered a lengthy plea for mercy, citing Vernon's age, philanthropic history, and alleged ignorance of certain illegal methods used by subordinates. The argument fell flat. The prosecution countered with evidence of multiple shell company memos personally signed by Vernon, plus witness statements from staff who had overheard his explicit orders to funnel funds illegally. When called upon to speak, Vernon stood, gripping the podium with trembling hands. "Your Honor, I acknowledge mistakes were made, but they were done under duress to keep the Foundation alive. My aim was to help the needy. Any deviations were forced by unscrupulous partners." He shot a glare toward Arnold. "I was betrayed by those around me, including certain employees who hid their wrongdoing behind my name." Judge Murdoch listened impassively, occasionally glancing at the documented evidence. The court was unconvinced. Murmurs rippled through the seats, many recalling how Vernon publicly cursed Calvin, threatened him, and tried countersuits that were all dismissed. Finally, Vernon concluded with, "I only ask for understanding. I've served my city for decades." The prosecution calmly reminded the court, "Such service does not grant immunity from crimes that siphoned millions and compromised legitimate charities." Next, Andrea was permitted a statement. She rose, face pale, voice shaking. "Your Honor, I regret my role deeply. I was persuaded by my father, misguided by Arnold, and too weak to resist. I've cooperated fully with the district attorney to rectify what I can. I never intended to defraud donors or my husband. I only wanted to support the Foundation's expansions and please my family. I'm truly sorry." She choked up, glancing momentarily at Calvin, who sat in the gallery behind the prosecution. Their eyes locked for a fraction of a second. Her gaze pleaded for empathy, but Calvin's expression remained neutral, giving no sign of comfort or malice. The DA acknowledged Andrea's cooperation, but reminded the court that she actively forged documents and misled donors. The partial cooperation might reduce her sentence, but it did not absolve her. A hush fell when an older gentleman, Mr. Langford, a philanthropic donor, stood to speak on how Andrea personally lured him into large donations under false pretenses. He described in detail the heartbreak he felt discovering the money never reached the promised communities. Andrea's tears flowed again, faced with the human cost of her actions. Arnold approached the podium, also seeking leniency. He repeated that he had turned over additional records exposing deeper layers of Vernon's bribery schemes. He insisted he was trapped by the Claibornes' demands, though the prosecution pointed out he gladly profited from the swindles. He tried a last emotional appeal, claiming he had a moral awakening once he realized children's education funds were being diverted. The judge's expression was stony, unimpressed by this conveniently timed awakening. In a twist, Arnold admitted forging not just financial records but also medical statements for certain child welfare programs. The court responded with heightened condemnation, labeling it an atrocious betrayal of the public trust. Finally, Judge Murdoch delivered her ruling, methodically reviewing each defendant's charges. Vernon Claiborne, guilty of conspiracy, grand larceny, money laundering, bribery, and more. Sentenced to 15-20 years in state prison, plus massive restitution orders. His advanced age offered limited time left on Earth, but the judge insisted that the severity of these crimes demands severe punishment. Andrea Claiborne, guilty of conspiracy to commit fraud, forgery, and partial complicity in money laundering. Due to her cooperation, the recommended sentence was 35 years in a minimum security facility, plus mandated community service post-release. She visibly trembled, tears streaking her cheeks. The judge sternly commented, "Mrs. Claiborne, you had many opportunities to stop or expose these crimes. You chose complicity. Arnold Weathers, guilty of conspiracy, money laundering, wire fraud. His cooperation partially lessened charges. He received 46 years, also owing substantial restitution." He sank into a seat, face ashen. The judge's gavel struck. The crowd collectively exhaled, the final punctuation on the Claiborne downfall. Marshals stepped forward to escort Vernon and Arnold away to begin processing. Andrea was given 48 hours before reporting to custody, presumably to handle personal affairs. The press erupted outside with a maelstrom of coverage. The wave of relief that swept through the city was mingled with shock. A once venerable name had crumbled in scandal and prison sentences. The philanthropic community felt vindicated that justice prevailed, though lamented the harm done to real charity projects. Calvin, sitting quietly as people filtered out of the courtroom, experienced a conflicted swirl of emotions. He was satisfied that criminals faced justice, yet a subtle sadness for Andrea's final fate. She had made her choices, but once she had also shared his dreams. As Andrea left the courtroom, flanked by lawyers, she paused near Calvin. Their eyes met. She whispered, "Thank you for not making it worse." He simply nodded, aware that anything more was futile. She gave a final, trembling smile before turning away, her footsteps echoing. The next time they might cross paths could be years from now. Outside the courthouse, a throng of reporters clamored for Calvin's reaction. Flashes lit up the gray sky, microphones thrust in his face. He offered a short statement. Justice was served. While it's tragic to see once respected individuals fall, it underscores the principle that no one stands above the law. I hope this can restore public faith in genuine, charitable endeavors. He refused personal questions about Andrea. Then he parted the crowd, stepping into a waiting car. Maribel Cross managed to approach for one last quote, but Calvin gently declined, promising a more formal interview later when the city had digested the news. In the car, Calvin closed his eyes, letting the tension bleed out. Marcus Howell, sitting beside him, patted his shoulder. "You did it. The system recognized your truth. You protected the city from further exploitation." Calvin nodded. Now to rebuild what was broken. In subsequent weeks, the city's philanthropic circles rallied under new leadership. The Nightingale reforms, a set of transparency guidelines championed by Calvin, became the de facto standard for all major charities. A specialized oversight committee was formed, featuring Vivian Green and Genevieve Price, among others, ensuring thorough audits of charitable finances. Donors regained confidence. Grassroots organizations that had once been overshadowed by Aurora Relief received renewed attention. Calvin's firm launched a philanthropic advisory division that rapidly expanded across state lines, assisting other regions in preventing fraud. Through it all, Calvin maintained a low personal profile, focusing on the mission rather than personal glory. The court also mandated that Claiborne assets be liquidated to repay defrauded donors. Hidden real estate was seized. Prized heirlooms were auctioned. A portion of those funds, ironically, was redirected to genuine relief programs that Aurora Relief had once falsely claimed to support. The press called it the Claiborne Restitution. Citizens noted the poetic justice, stolen philanthropic money returning to help real causes. Chapter 10. A crisp winter set in. The hustle of the city moved forward, overshadowing the Claiborne scandal with newer news cycles. Yet the legacy of the meltdown lingered. Every mention of Aurora Relief came with cautionary remarks about oversight. The name Claiborne was practically exiled from polite society, a pariah brand that donors avoided. Calvin found a strange calm settling into his life. He resumed regular duties at Nightingale and Cross, meeting with legitimate philanthropic groups, guiding wealthy clients who sought meaningful charitable avenues. Freed from the toxic tangles of the Claibornes, he no longer had to watch his back constantly. A sense of purpose fueled him, ensuring that no other cunning family repeated the same manipulative pattern. One morning, he visited a battered old community center on the outskirts of the city. It was receiving a major infusion of funds from a newly established integrity grant that Calvin's firm had helped design. The center's director, an elderly woman named Rosa Finley, greeted him with tears of gratitude. Her small, underfunded programs for at-risk youth had often been overshadowed by the glamour of big philanthropy events. Now she had resources to expand. She told him, "Your reforms gave donors confidence to sponsor real community needs. We finally can fix the leaky roof and start after-school tutoring." He smiled warmly. This was the tangible result of the fiasco. Real people benefiting from a purified philanthropic environment. For the first time in months, he felt pure positivity about the future. Legally, Calvin was still married to Andrea, though her sentencing sealed their separation. She was scheduled to serve her 3-year prison term upstate. Through attorneys, they negotiated the final divorce settlement. Most of their shared property had been sold or forfeited to offset the foundation's restitution. Andrea relinquished any claim on Calvin's personal holdings, given the fiasco she had enabled. The day the divorce was finalized, Calvin felt a mixture of sorrow and liberation. A hush fell in the firm's legal division when the judge's final decree arrived. He was officially free of the marriage, unshackled from the illusions that had bound him. At the same time, he recognized that winning in this realm came with scars. Once, he had hoped to build a real life with Andrea, perhaps have a family. Now that path was irrevocably closed. He spent that evening quietly in his apartment, recalling memories both tender and bitter. He reread a page from her diaries that recounted the early days of their romance. For a moment, it was as if the ghost of who they once were flickered before him. Then he closed the diary, exhaling. The door to that life was shut. Weeks later, in the midst of reorganizing city philanthropic committees, Calvin received an unexpected invitation from the governor's office. The governor sought his expertise on statewide philanthropic integrity laws after witnessing the fiasco's scale. They proposed naming Calvin to a volunteer board that would advise legislative changes. Marcus Howell was cautious. "This could put you even more in the public eye. Are you sure you want that? You've had enough spotlight." Calvin pondered. "If I can institutionalize robust checks so no other family can replicate the Claiborne scheme, it's worth it. Let's accept," He accepted, stepping deeper into the realm of policy. He found an unlikely ally in a young progressive state senator, Marjorie Dunn, who had championed anti-corruption bills for years. She recognized in Calvin a partner with lived experience. Together, they formed a small bipartisan group drafting the Transparent Philanthropy Act. Local press hailed it as a direct consequence of the Claiborne meltdown. As winter melted into spring, the city's philanthropic scene embraced the Nightingale reforms, ensuring mandatory third-party audits for charity organizations, transparent donation tracking, and publicly accessible quarterly reports. The new wave of trust spawned an influx of donations that overshadowed even Aurora Relief's prime days. But this time, the money actually reached the needy. At a grand unveiling of a community youth arts center, the mayor publicly thanked Calvin for spurring the city's philanthropic renaissance. A plaque at the entrance read, "In honor of those who ensured no child's hope be stolen again." Though not directly naming Calvin, the sentiment was clear. He felt a twinge of humility, recalling how it started with personal betrayal and ended with broad social improvement. Simultaneously, news reached him that Andrea had begun volunteering inside her minimum security facility, assisting illiterate inmates with reading. Perhaps she sought redemption. The warden wrote that she displayed genuine remorse. Calvin read that letter with a quiet, bittersweet acceptance. People could change if they truly wanted to, but it didn't erase the past. The final vestiges of the Claiborne meltdown lingered in social circles. But Calvin had largely moved on. He found a sense of renewed direction in championing philanthropic ethics. In the process, he formed new friendships, some with fellow do-gooders, some with private sector experts aligned with his vision. He started traveling occasionally to other states, consulting on anti-fraud systems for charitable institutions, building on the success in Boston. Vivian Green accompanied him on some trips, their professional bond evolving into a warm camaraderie. People sometimes speculated about a romantic angle, but at the moment, they remained content in a shared mission. In the hush of a post-conference evening on a rooftop in Chicago, Vivian confided that she, too, had once been entangled in a corrupted philanthropic group before she met Calvin. She had recognized the pattern in Aurora Relief, but lacked the platform to expose it alone. That was why she was so dedicated to helping him. Moved by her honesty, he realized they had more in common than he suspected. Yet, romance was unspoken, overshadowed by the enormity of their cause. For now, they let it be. One day, a minor uproar shook the city. Revelations that a small group of donors had tried to quietly rescue Vernon from prison by bribing parole boards. The attempt was discovered, ironically, by the new oversight structures Calvin helped put in place. Those donors were swiftly charged with attempted bribery. This fiasco hammered home how deeply the old system's corruption ran. Even from prison, Vernon apparently tried to manipulate outcomes. The public reacted with outrage, demanding even stricter enforcement. The newly minted Philanthropic Watch Agency, spearheaded by Genevieve Price and others, took immediate action, revoking any philanthropic license from those donors. The system Calvin had built was working no more hush-hush deals. An investigative reporter discovered that the Claiborne estate's paintings and heirlooms, once expected to fetch millions at auction, sold for far less because of their tarnished provenance. Some prestigious auction houses refused Claiborne items altogether, citing reputational damage. This final blow underscored the total downfall of the family's legacy. A letter from Arnold arrived for Calvin one afternoon, delivered via prison channels. In a carefully worded page, Arnold admitted his deep regret for the affair and the scams, explaining how he was enthralled by the Claiborne influence and the thrill of easy money. He wrote that prison forced him to face his own moral emptiness. He also grudgingly thanked Calvin for at least using the meltdown to fix the city's philanthropic scene. Calvin read the letter with measured calm, unmoved by Arnold's emotional tone. He recognized the letter as a mixture of remorse and self-pity. He penned a curt reply. "I accept your regret. Focus on rebuilding your integrity if possible. Our chapter is closed." Sending it off, he felt no satisfaction, just a final sense of distance from the entire fiasco. The betrayals had run deep, but the future was no longer entwined with the Claibornes or their associates. As the city's philanthropic renaissance continued, a coalition of small charities decided to honor Calvin with a Community Integrity Award. Word spread that the ceremony would be a modest, heartfelt affair, not a glitzy gala, to reflect genuine gratitude. Initially reluctant to receive personal accolades, Calvin ultimately agreed to attend. Held in a converted warehouse that now served as a local arts center, the event was intimate. Painted murals by neighborhood kids lined the walls, bright and hopeful. A small stage featured a lineup of community leaders praising the unstoppable wave of transparency that Calvin ignited. When Calvin stepped on stage to accept the plaque, he glimpsed Andrea's mother, Genevieve, not to be confused with Genevieve Price, standing quietly in the back. Having avoided prison, she wore subdued attire, looking far from her once grand social presence. Their gazes met briefly. She gave a small, sad nod, as if acknowledging that her family's downfall was justified. He offered a curt nod back. The entire room felt the echoes of the Claiborne meltdown, but recognized that something better had replaced it. He delivered a short speech. "Thank you. This honor is not about me, but about every volunteer who ensures donations reach real people. Our city overcame deception by standing for truth. May we continue building a philanthropic culture that truly uplifts lives." A standing ovation ensued, reaffirming that the city had turned a page closing the Claiborne chapter, forging a new era with accountability at its core. Chapter 11. Winter gave way to a bright spring. The air felt fresher, as if the entire city breathed easier after purging the Claiborne toxicity. The philanthropic reforms that Calvin championed took root in neighboring municipalities too, with local governments adopting similar transparency mandates. Meanwhile, public trust soared in legitimate charities, boosting their funding for actual good works. In his personal life, Calvin felt a slow healing process. Freed from illusions, he reconnected with old friends he had neglected during his years of constantly juggling the Claiborne social circle. He began hosting small dinner gatherings in his city apartment, intimate affairs with no pretense. Laughter around his table replaced the forced society banter of the old days. Sometimes, in quiet moments, he still recalled the early sparks of love with Andrea, how she giggled at his jokes or teased him about being too serious. But those memories no longer hurt as sharply. He recognized them as part of a life chapter that ended, overshadowed by her betrayal. Over time, he found acceptance. One particular highlight was the official formation of the Boston Philanthropy Council. This body included city officials, philanthropic experts like Vivian Green, finance specialists like Genevieve Price, plus grassroots organizers. The council's mandate: to ensure robust oversight on all major philanthropic initiatives. They invited Calvin to serve as an honorary co-chair. Initially, he hesitated, fearful of returning to the public stage in such a formal role, but his sense of duty prevailed, and he accepted. At the council's inaugural meeting, the mayor publicly applauded him for turning personal tragedy into a citywide impetus for reform. Calvin, in turn, praised the volunteers and smaller charities that bravely carried on despite the Aurora fiasco. The synergy was real, forging new bonds of trust. The city's largest newspaper published an editorial titled, "From Ashes to Integrity, The Nightingale Legacy," praising how Calvin's exposure of the Claiborne scam birthed a new era in civic philanthropy. It singled out how he refused to let cynicism dominate, instead building frameworks to protect genuine donors and recipients. The editorial concluded that true generosity thrives when steered by honesty, a motto many embraced. Rumors arose that Andrea might receive parole earlier than expected due to her cooperation in exposing additional corruption networks. The DA had used her continued revelations to crack down on smaller fraudulent charities in other states. Whispers suggested she might be out in as little as 2 years. Calvin's reaction was measured. He felt no desire to hamper her parole, but neither would he champion it. If she'd found genuine remorse, so be it. Whether or not she rejoined society soon, his path diverged from hers irreversibly. Yet part of him recognized that had she stayed silent, certain aspects of the Aurora scandal might never have come to light. Her partial redemption was a complicated note in the final chord of their relationship. One day, Calvin unexpectedly received a letter from the prison chaplain stating Andrea was assisting new inmates with reading skills and emotional support. She wrote a short poem about atonement. The chaplain thought Calvin might want to see it. He read it once, felt a flicker of sadness, then set it aside. The past was done. News from inside Vernon's prison indicated he continued to rant about conspiracies, refusing to accept accountability. He penned multiple appeals, each swiftly rejected by appellate courts. The once patrician father could not adapt to prison life. Rumors of scuffles with other inmates circulated. The media occasionally ran sensational updates about his complaints of unfair conditions. The city largely ignored him, viewing him as a pitiful old figure raging in obscurity. Arnold, meanwhile, quietly did his time, rumored to be focusing on self-improvement courses. Inmates said he planned a tell-all book upon release, though likely no one would show interest. The scandal was well documented by legitimate journalists, leaving Arnold's potential story overshadowed. A small circle of remaining Claiborne relatives tried to salvage their once illustrious family history. They attempted to sue the city for defamation by association, an absurd notion the courts dismissed. Their claims only added comedic footnotes to the grand fiasco that was the Claiborne meltdown. In short, every last attempt to salvage that name failed. Amid these swirling events, Calvin found new joys in simple living. Freed from the charade of forced high society dinners, he explored everyday pleasures, biking along the river, attending local music festivals, or volunteering at real community outreach events. People recognized him sometimes, praising or thanking him, but he gracefully deflected personal accolades, encouraging them to support the cause. One evening, after a successful philanthropic council session, he ended up at a cozy wine bar with Vivian Green and Genevieve Price. The trio, once co-conspirators in exposing Aurora Relief, had become good friends. Over a bottle of red wine, they toasted the city's transformation. Vivian teased Calvin lightly. "You realize you've become a folk hero in these circles, right?" He shrugged, sipping. "The real heroes are those on the ground, like Miss Finley at the community center. I just provided the spark." Genevieve gave a warm smile. "Yes, but sometimes a spark is all it takes to ignite real change." Later that night, as they parted ways, Vivian lingered, hesitating. She admitted softly that she admired not just his professional diligence, but his personal moral courage. A spark of intimacy flickered between them. Calvin realized that maybe, after all the heartbreak, something new could blossom. They left it unspoken for now, acknowledging a possibility that life could yield unexpected second chances. Maribel Cross approached Calvin about writing a deeper exposé, something beyond her earlier breaking news coverage, a comprehensive story capturing the personal dimension of betrayal, revenge, and renewal. She proposed a collaborative book or documentary. Calvin was unsure, wary of sensationalizing a painful chapter of his life, but he saw the educational value. It could serve as a cautionary tale to prevent future corruption. He agreed in principle, requesting that any proceeds go to the new charitable trust for underprivileged communities. Maribel found that fitting, a final symbolic gesture that the pain from the Claiborne fiasco would yield resources for those truly in need. During the drafting stages, Maribel discovered new corners of the Claiborne scheme that even Calvin hadn't known: small side deals, minor official bribes. She concluded that the corruption was deeper than imagined, but all had been destroyed by the meltdown. Calvin read those final chapters, shaking his head at the scale of moral rot. He felt gratitude that the city had emerged stronger from the ashes. One last unexpected accolade arrived. A national anti-corruption nonprofit recognized Calvin with a Defender of Integrity award. The ceremony took place in Washington, D.C., featuring notable figures from philanthropic oversight and ethics committees. He traveled there with minimal fanfare, accompanied by Marcus Howell. Standing among a group of honorees who had exposed corruption in various industries, Calvin felt humbled. Each story was unique. Some overcame corporate greed, others dismantled political machines. His saga was the Aurora fiasco, a personal heartbreak turned citywide reformation. In his acceptance speech, he reiterated a core principle. Corruption often hides behind good intentions and smiling facades. It takes courage and sometimes heartbreak to pull back the curtain. But if we persist, we can transform even the most toxic illusions into genuine, life-changing reforms. The audience offered sustained applause, the moment both solemn and triumphant. He left the stage feeling that his journey, while painful, had contributed to a broader fight against fraud. A sense of closure washed over him. Chapter 12. Spring gave way to a warm, hopeful summer. The city's philanthropic renaissance reached full bloom. New community centers, arts programs, environmental cleanups, all thriving under transparent oversight. The old Aurora Relief name was seldom mentioned, except as a cautionary footnote. Citizens had embraced the wave of real charity, forging a sense of unity across previously divided social classes. Calvin spent mornings meeting with up-and-coming nonprofit leaders, guiding them to adopt the rigorous standards that prevented fraud. By day's end, he returned to his firm's ever-growing philanthropic advisory. He found satisfaction in seeing legitimate donors connect with worthy beneficiaries, free from hidden agendas. In a sense, this was the outcome he had always wanted: philanthropy that truly served. He was at peace in his personal life, too. Freed from illusions, he formed deeper, more genuine friendships. He occasionally joined small gatherings with his staff, celebrating birthdays or volunteering as a group at local shelters. The sense of authenticity replaced the hollow parties of old. When people asked about his personal future romance, family, he answered with a gentle smile that he was open to new possibilities, though not in a rush. 2 years later, Andrea's early parole was granted. She quietly left the minimum security facility with little fanfare, overshadowed by the city's forward momentum. She had nowhere grand to return to. The Claiborne mansion was long sold. Her father remained in prison. Some distant cousins refused to help her. She ended up renting a modest apartment, hoping to rebuild her life on honest terms. She wrote Calvin a short note. "I'm out. I'll try to find honest work. Thank you for not standing in my way." He read it with a gentle pang. He wouldn't forget the betrayal, but neither did he crave her continued punishment. Let her find what redemption she could. He placed the note aside, focusing on his newly minted philanthropic engagements. Their stories had diverged for good. The final court ruling on Claiborne Estate. Meanwhile, an additional piece of closure arrived when a final court order authorized the sale of the last Claiborne Estate properties. The proceeds funded a restitution fund for defrauded donors and for ongoing philanthropic oversight. A fraction of the estate's once glorious antiques, paintings, and jewels ended up displayed in a city museum as exhibits of infamy, accompanied by placards explaining how they financed a massive fraud. The museum displayed them not to honor the Claiborne name, but to educate the public on the perils of unchecked power. Genevieve Claiborne, Andrea's mother, tried to oppose the display, claiming it humiliated her family further. But the city's cultural commission overruled her. In a final blow, the museum's descriptive text credited Calvin's whistleblowing for exposing the empire. The entire fiasco became a historical cautionary lesson for future generations, effectively stamping the Claiborne downfall as a permanent footnote in local history. One late summer evening, after concluding an advisory session for a new youth scholarship program, Calvin found himself sitting with Vivian Green in a quiet bistro near the harbor. They laughed about an earlier debate in the Philanthropic Council, how a small friction over auditing overshadowed simpler solutions. The chemistry between them had steadily grown, nurtured by shared convictions and mutual respect. They strolled along the wharf afterward, the moonlight shimmering on the water. She confessed softly that working side by side with him had become more than just a professional collaboration, that she admired his courage in forging a new path after heartbreak. He admitted he, too, felt an emotional connection. They ended the night with a gentle kiss under the moonlit sky, a tentative step toward something that neither forced nor rushed, a new beginning untainted by illusions. As they parted, Vivian teased him. "Finally, you let yourself be open again. Did we need another scandalous gala to push you forward?" He chuckled. "No more galas. I think we can just do things the honest way." In the weeks that followed, rumors of Calvin and Vivian's closeness circulated quietly. Some corners of the city that still harbored old power structures whispered that Calvin found a new social partner. But their negativity held no weight. The city had moved on, embracing sincerity and transparency. Calvin and Vivian carried on, unbothered by idle chatter, focusing on forging legitimate philanthropic success stories across the region. The city's philanthropic index soared. Donors poured money into well-structured nonprofits. Projects once overshadowed by Aurora Relief now thrived, from after-school reading programs to affordable housing initiatives. Calvin felt a swelling pride each time he saw tangible improvements in people's lives. This was the redemption of philanthropic ideals that Andrea's father had twisted for personal gain. One day in the newly rebuilt community center, Ms. Rosa Finley approached Calvin with tears of gratitude, describing how her program expanded to 3 more neighborhoods serving hundreds of kids. She handed him a letter from a young student who overcame illiteracy and got into a reputable high school. The child thanked Mr. Nightingale for clearing the path. Calvin read it, feeling a sense of quiet triumph. This was worth any personal heartbreak, a genuine impact on real lives. A final letter arrived from prison, but not from Andrea or Vernon. Genevieve Claiborne, the mother, wrote a carefully worded note from her partial house arrest. She insisted on her own innocence, but conceded that the system found her partially complicit. She lamented the downfall of her dynasty and expressed a strange admiration for Calvin's unwavering integrity. "Perhaps," she wrote, "if our family had shown half your resolve, we wouldn't be in disgrace." He set the letter aside with a wry smile, noting it as a faint echo of a shattered aristocracy trying to rationalize itself. By the end of that year, the Transparent Philanthropy Act passed the state legislature, cementing the new standards into law. The city, lauded by national media, became a model for philanthropic integrity. Calvin's role was recognized in official records, though he maintained a humble stance. He turned down multiple offers for high political office, preferring to remain a private sector figure ensuring business and charity coexisted ethically. In a final symbolic gesture, the old Aurora Relief Building was repurposed into a community empowerment hub, run by small nonprofits collectively. The sign outside read, "Open to all, fear no fraud," a playful nod to the meltdown that started everything. Calvin attended the opening ceremony, standing in the back, watching local youth cut the ribbon. He felt a lightness in his chest, the final reclamation of a space once used for deception, now repurposed for genuine service. One breezy afternoon, Calvin and Vivian hosted a small celebration at his apartment, inviting close colleagues, grassroots leaders, friends from the firm, and a few community center volunteers. No fancy invitation cards or lavish decor, just homemade dishes, heartfelt conversation, and a sense of family, absent from the Claiborne parties of old. People laughed, told stories of children thriving under new programs, and toasted to the end of elitist fraud. Later, as the crowd dispersed, Calvin stepped onto his balcony with Vivian. The skyline glowed in the sunset. She rested her head on his shoulder. "Look at how far we've come," she whispered. "From that disastrous gala to an entire city changed for the better." He squeezed her hand. It's funny how personal betrayal can spark something bigger like a chain reaction that reforms an entire system. If I had known how messy it would get, would I have done it? Probably yes, because ignoring the truth wasn't an option. She smiled, eyes shining. "That's who you are, Calvin. You can't stand illusions, even if it costs you. And now, you've built something new, both for yourself and for the city." Their gaze locked, the unspoken promise of a future unburdened by lies. The city lights danced below, and in that quiet moment, he felt something akin to genuine hope, the kind that is born of scars, but blooms into strength. The betrayal had cut deep, but from the wreckage, he had nurtured a garden of honesty and compassion. Epilogue. In the final months of that transformative year, the city thrived under the new philanthropic frameworks. Numerous families emerged from poverty thanks to the transparent infusion of donor support. Local charities expanded across neighborhoods once ignored by large foundations. The state recognized the Nightingale Standard as an official best practice guideline for nonprofits. The Claiborne saga faded from the front pages, replaced by stories of real success. Occasionally, a small corner of the news reported Vernon's repeated failed appeals or Andrea's adjustment to life post-incarceration. But the city's interest waned. They looked forward rather than backward. Calvin himself found equilibrium, his firm prospered, his philanthropic leadership soared, and his budding relationship with Vivian brought a gentle warmth. While heartbreak and betrayal had shaped him, he refused to be defined by bitterness. Instead, he embraced the principle that from every dark corner of corruption, a vigilant spirit could cast light, forging new possibilities. One evening, as he strolled by the waterfront, where once he'd confronted Arnold, Calvin paused to watch the ships passing. The waves glimmered under moonlight. He reflected that no illusions remained, only the steadfast knowledge that he had faced betrayal, unleashed a meticulous plan of revenge, and in the process delivered justice for the entire city. Even as it cost him emotionally, the result was a better philanthropic environment for thousands of everyday citizens. His phone buzzed with a message from the Philanthropic Council chat. "Another new nonprofit applying for certification. Ready for your final check?" He smiled, typed a quick, "Yes. Send me the docs." Then he tucked the phone away, continuing his walk along the wharf. In that quiet serenity, he understood that while the painful chapters were behind him, a richer, more meaningful chapter lay ahead, one shaped by honesty, compassion, and unbreakable resolve. The city's skyline glowed with promise, a testament to how one determined man, fueled by heartbreak and guided by moral conviction, could reshape an entire system. That was Calvin Nightingale's greatest triumph. Not simply dismantling the Claiborne illusions, but ensuring that in their place rose a structure of real integrity, one that would stand long after the scandal's headlines faded.